I have to congratulate the ones that are here that have the stamina to brave the element out tonight. Hi, Evie, Ron. Item 1, please, Joe. Oh, yeah. Roll call, please.
Mayor?
Pleasant, present.
First Ward? Here. Second Ward? Here. Third Ward? Here. Fourth Ward? Here. Fifth Ward? Present. Sixth Ward? Here. Present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Item 1, please.
Whereas a meeting of the council held on February 2nd, the clerk was authorized and directed to advertise for a public hearing to be held February 16th, 1993 at 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers of the municipal building relative to a zone change request submitted by the Chamber of Commerce for change of zone from M1 manufacturing to C2 commercial for their property located on South 2nd Street for the purpose of constructing a public service building. The public hearing is now declared open.
Any comments? Well, it's a zone change, so they can't. It's presently zoned industrial, so you can't build commercial on industrial. Why, I don't know, but I guess that's the law. Whether they actually will build or not, I don't know. I think it's a good change anyway. I don't see reasoning why all that area shouldn't be commercial. There's certainly nobody's going to build a factory there unless it's the skinniest factory in the world. If there's no comment, public hearing is closed.
Whereas public and members of the council and those in attendance who wish to voice their opinion regarding the zone change request submitted by the Chamber have been heard. Now therefore be it resolved that the zone change request submitted by the Chamber of Commerce for their property located on South 2nd is hereby approved.
I'll move it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Sorry, Ann, you didn't have a chance to comment on it. We fooled you, the meeting started on time. 2, please.
Resolved that the area of the Samuel J. Patney Insurance Agency located at 157 North 2nd Street be and hereby is exempted from Chapter 75 Fulton City Code entitled Fire Limits. Be it further resolved that it is the intent of this resolution to eliminate the fire limits for said property located at 157 North 2nd Street as long as it is not used for residential purposes.
Motion. I'll move it. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 3, please.
Resolved that the mayor is hereby authorized to sign the letter of election between the City of Fulton and Alltel, New York, dated February 3rd, 1993.
Just one little comment about this. Alltel has come up with a new system that's going to be more efficient, provide more services for our telephones in the city, as well as replacing some that probably were here when the city was originally incorporated. And believe it or not, it's going to be cheaper afterwards than it was before. The cost of installation and replacing phones will be recouped within 11 months, and after that, it'll be gravy. Motion, please.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 4, please.
Notation that the city clerk has advised this council at this meeting that the proper letters of disclosure pursuant to Section 803 of General Municipal Law has been filed. John J. Perfumi, owner of Perfumi Extinguisher, Kurt Brown, owner of Mike's Gun Shop, Richard Allen, Nuisance Wildlife Control, and Wayne Newton, Nuisance Wild Control.
5, please.
Resolved, City Clerk, as Records Management Officer for the City of Fulton, be authorized to dispose of records that no longer have a purpose, useful or legal purpose, in accordance with the laws of the State Education Department and the MU1 retention schedule as per attached.
Motion.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 6, please.
Resolved the schedule of bills payable from December 21, 92 through February 8, 93, which were audited by the Audit Committee of the Common Council, are hereby approved.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 7, please.
Resolved that the special use permit request submitted by Russ Johnson and Joe Arrigo for their property located at 18 North 7th Street for the purpose of removing an existing garage, replacing it with a new garage with an apartment is hereby referred to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 8, please. Good evening, Ross. 8, please.
Resolved the veterans exemption for Anthony F. Perfumi for his property located at 401 Fulton Avenue is hereby referred to the city attorney.
9, please.
Resolved that report of receipts and disbursements for the city clerk's office for the month of January in the amount of $4,238.82 be received, approved, and placed on file.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 10, please.
Resolved that the city clerk be authorized to purchase pre-exposure vaccine for the animal control officer from Tops Pharmacy at a cost of $244.50 for 3 vaccinations as required. Said vaccine will be administered by the Oswego County Health Department.
We're not buying vaccine, incidentally, for the animal control officer for his personal use. This is vaccine that he must have to be vaccinated with because he's exposed to so many diseases that can be transmitted from the animals to the animal control officer. Motion, please.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Opposed? Carried. 11, please.
Resolved that this common council accepts the quote submitted by Massaro Detroit Diesel in the amount of $5,795 to overhaul the engine of 1984 Trojan payloader to be a direct charge to the 5110 Maintenance of Streets account.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 12.
Resolved that the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to advertise for a public hearing to be held on March 2nd, 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers of the municipal building relative to proposed vending fees in the city of Fulton.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 13, please.
Resolved the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to advertise for a public hearing to be held on March 2nd, 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers municipal building relative to a proposed ordinance amendment which would ban vending at Bullhead Point.
Motion.
I'll move it.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Do you have any other? Okay, under discussion, number 1, please.
Resolved that that this council hereby refers a request from the Friends of Voorhees Park in the children's room of Fulton Public Library of joint to provide free cultural programs to the youth in our area to the Greater Fulton Tourism Council for their recommendation.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 2, please. This is the Y lease. Do you gentlemen have something you wanted to say before the council takes it up? All right. We talked about this preliminarily, and I think you know that the city is concerned about what happens to the old Y building, and wondered if you have any plans for that at the present time.
At the present time, the structure is for sale, the property.
Dick, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Spencer just mentioned that this is something probably should be discussed in the executive council. Okay? Thank you. I mean, if you wish to do so. All right. Let's see, we're... Okay.
First of all, I had a couple other things I wanted to go over. I wanted to go over
What do you want to go, what do you want to go?
where we are in solid waste.
What do you want to go first?
Stuff on solid waste. Do you want to just read off your slide? This is where we are after the first one. That's the last year. Where those-
Here, Troy?
Stroud? Has to do with sale or lease of property.
That doesn't come under the disclosure laws.
Pardon me?
That's not one of the exclusions.
That's what my city attorney tells me.
Spencer, that's not one of the exclusions under the public meetings law. Show me a copy.
She's right.
Well, I just happen to have a copy of that here.
I mean, if it is, you know, we have to be quiet and sit down, but I don't recall it doing it.
Yeah, the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property. Okay?
Does it belong to the city?
Yes,
Provide it?
you know, the land, the real property, and why it's being located, it does. Certainly there'll be a public hearing as to the lease,
Yeah.
but as far as discussions with respect to the details of the lease, that's certainly executive session.
I mean, you have that option. It's not like this hasn't been bandied about in public for about 2.5
Gonna be.
years.
It's all gonna be aired eventually anyway. Okay.
Alderman Lincoln wanted me to read these totals of the solid waste totals through, from 1/1/92 through 1/31/92. There was 176.03 tons for net weight of 352,000 pounds. 1/1/93 through 1/30/93, it is down to 152.72 tons, or 305,000 net weight pounds.
Yeah, I've had a garbage complaint at 402 Worth Street for, I don't know, it's been an ongoing problem from January 15th. And we've sent a couple letters to them, but the problem still exists. There's garbage out. And I was wondering if we could pass a resolution tonight to get it cleaned up and add it to the general tax that he pays to the city. Or can we just go over it?
I thought Steve was supposed to.
Well, Bryce Talents is the one that's been sending these letters. And, you know, maybe they aren't being followed up.
Race is something.
Yeah.
Why is he something?
Steve Lund is going to file.
Steve gonna file a complaint?
Steve's done it for us before.
Steve, are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it, just talking to John, I referred every time to Brace Talents. Somewhere along the line it was decided that he'd handle the garbage around the house and being the housing inspector.
My question is, you know, we sent them 2 letters and the problem still exists.
Well, somebody gonna do an AI?
I'm not sure if he has or not. I can't answer that.
You check it out. You let me know tomorrow. I'll be in the office in the afternoon. 402?
Yeah, it's 402 Worth.
Worth?
Yeah.
Okay, there's an open discussion now on Kmart, if anybody wishes to say anything about it. We have a letter from the town of Alney, which says annexation definitely out the window, and I don't think that comes as any surprise to anybody. And they are saying that there should be alternative options to annexation, including but not limited to the sharing of local county and school taxes by the town, county, and school boards within the city of Fulton, or with the city of Fulton. Anybody got any comment?
Yeah, I do.
John?
I've done a little research, as far as annexation goes, and I called Brian Patrick and was talking to him about their developments in Patrick Circle and Pollard Hills, and I found out that the Patrick Circle area was annexed in the late 60s. Pollard Hills was annexed in the early 70s. Did a little research in the Pyramid Mall too. That was never annexed into the city of Fulton, but at the time his father was mayor. They came and requested water and sewer from the city of Fulton, and at that time the original plans were not to put that mall in the city of Fulton. But at that time too, Percy said that the water and sewer would be given to you if that mall was going to be in the city of Fulton. So that's how that all came about. I've done a little research, and I want to thank Ron Patrick for giving me that information on those types of developments that have been positive for the community. I took a drive over to Webster, New York. That's another mall that Widewaters have, and I took some pictures of the mall, but pass them around to the council. They put together a pretty decent mall. They're pretty well occupied as far as tenants go, and they're quite pleased in the community that Widewaters is so effective in attracting merchants to their mall. I have a few other things I'd like to say, but I'd like to open it up for general conversation from the public also.
Brian?
This is a tough situation for the city, but it's something that I think the towns and city have to agree is for the betterment of the whole community, and not Fulton as a community, but this part of the Circle County. Maybe Mr. McFarland can answer one of my questions. Why is Powney against? What are the reasons against the annexation?
Go ahead, Al.
No, I need to know that first. What are there specific reasons why they're against it?
I choose not to answer that at this time.
Well, then how can we negotiate anything if we can't find out the reasons why you're against something?
Ron, did you watch that next to the last town meeting, hall meeting? Because that would answer your question. It's mostly emotional.
Well, I heard, I don't know who the heck I heard it from, but they thought that maybe one of the reasons was distrust of the city council, or a distrust of where this agreement could be broken at any time, and then once the land is annexed, the town is left out. So why can't an agreement be made where it's annexed, the town gets paid their dollars in property taxes, and this agreement cannot be rescinded without a majority approval of both the city common council and the town of Alney board?
Well, the things that seemed to be expressed at that meeting were that it got pretty emotional, and the general idea that you're taking part of our town became a focus of resentment that was pretty obvious. And there were some there that were kind of feeding that frenzy, you might say. But also, one man, an engineer, who got up, kind of surprised me, and later turned out he was the chairman of the Democratic Committee in the town of Valney, said that, well, if we do that, Fulton's going to annex all the property up to Great Bear Farm, which, obviously was pretty silly on its face, because we can't do it unless they agree anyway. And despite what was said by Mr. Maroney, I'm sure no judge is ever going to agree to such an annexation. and the city of Fulton would be crazy if they did, because the cost of simply maintaining the infrastructure of such an addition would be prohibitive. So that seemed to be, and people seem to believe that, at least some of the council there, or the board seemed to believe it. And this same engineer says, well, I don't care about $100,000 the town would make out of this thing. He said, it ain't going to affect my taxes any, which I thought was rather cavalier too. But it's really unfortunate that the air that has been created in the atmosphere in the town is a very hostile atmosphere. And they don't seem to be willing to agree to anything as far as annexation, no matter what the town, how the town would benefit by it, which I found a little hard to understand. You're talking about 26 acres of land out of thousands of acres of land in the town of Olney. It was an extremely small price, if you want to call it a price. But to add to what John said too, might be interested to know that originally the city consisted of two villages. One was the village of Oswego Falls on the west side, which was part of the town of Granby. The other was the village of Fulton on the east side, which was part of the town of Olney. And they combined to form the city of Fulton. So that annexation is certainly nothing new, either in this state or any other state in the country. It's going on all the time and has ever since this country was founded. So that the idea of annexation being such a novel experiment is certainly not the case. And how any town can reject out of hand the creation of about 400 jobs is a little hard to understand too. In this time when every job is precious, and when everybody is literally almost begging for jobs, when kids who get out of school can't find a job, when kids can't get summer jobs, when our welfare rolls comprise almost 60% now of our population in this city. I find that a little hard to understand their attitude as a whole, and why they won't really seriously consider annexation. We would never insist upon it if it wasn't so vital to this city. We have to survive, and sales tax is 1/3 of our revenue. And a law like that could seriously undermine our sales tax revenue. That's why we're asking for it. But it not only opens up that opportunity for the city to recoup sales taxes, it kind of opens up the whole area. You know, the town of Olney apparently wants to say, well, we don't want to develop, we don't want to grow, we don't want to change. I don't think anybody really wants to. I'd love to see Fulton the way it was when I was a kid. You know, it was almost a paradise. But that ain't the way it is. And it's going to change even more. The town of Olney's going to change, whether they like it or not. And how it changes makes all the difference in the world. Either they do it and plan it right to their benefit and everybody else in this area, or they'll be dragged, as one wise man once said, kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So it's too bad they feel that way about it. It's too bad that they let the emotions dictate their decisions. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ron. I'm sorry. Thanks. Can I call you? Go ahead.
This problem never would have existed if the county had done their sales tax that they were from last year.
That's true.
The problems, the things I can't comprehend, I guess, this is a great move for everyone. Because this whole section of the county, it could help make things, other things come in, make things grow, create jobs. And what I can't understand is, the mayor said just the 25 acres, which isn't a lot of land. But it's money that Valley cannot collect anyway. They cannot collect the sales tax. And by giving us a sales tax, then they're able to get their property tax. And I just cannot comprehend the town refusing this option.
Well,
I said that if it was a matter of finding out their exact reason why they're against a deal that is fair to both parties. If it's a point where they're afraid it could be rescinded, then it seems to me the agreement could be made, or there could be a majority of both bodies to change any parts of their agreement.
Yeah, you're right. It'd be a very easy thing to do. They're really being short-sighted too, because there's going to be expansion in Valney, no question about it. And you know, there's been 2 developers in recent months that have come to me, as a matter of fact, to ask, is water and sewer available if we go ahead with these developments in the town? And I had to say no. And this could happen if they agreed to the annexation of the mall. So what they're doing is they're shutting the door on any further expansion as far as any water and sewer from the city of Fulton is coming. And that's pretty short-sighted. And now with the new rules on septic systems that went into effect last year, if your land doesn't pass the test, you have to build 4 foot of topsoil and install your septic system in that and pump it up into it in order to operate it. And the figures I get from a contractor is $10,000 to $15,000 to do that. That's going to be added to every new home in the towns that do not have sewage. So I don't think the board is thinking about some of those little items and what it means to the town.
I also want to say this, that the economic growth is moving north. You know, they're at Cicero
right.
now, and they're headed our way, so, you know, we got to be prepared and accept that when it does come, because it's going to mean a lot of change for a lot of people. And it's a positive change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, but
The repercussions are so immense that it has to be worked out. The city, not just they need the sales tax, they have to protect the businesses that are already within the city that are paying the 7%. They have a mall of this magnitude, a few hundred feet away at 4% is too much of an added competition.
yes, and of course, despite what some people think, that mall is definitely going to keep people here that are going now to Great Northern and to Oswego. Now that you've got a Walmart going into Oswego and you got one up in Great Northern, let me tell you, it's going to draw a lot of people. I was in a Walmart in Florida, and let me tell you, they got something to offer. Anybody else? Okay. John, you said you had some other things you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I have a case that was decided in 1991 here. That similar circumstances between Fulton and Valney existed, and they would have ruled like in the city of Fulton's favor, you know, with the annexation. I'd like to share that with the rest of the council too.
I'd like to see that.
And then too, when I was over at one of their developments over in Webster, I talked with the manager at Kmart, and he said that Whitewaters was a great outfit to do business with. The dealings with landlords were extremely satisfactory. Kmart itself does a lot for the community, like a lot of donations to charities and different things like that. There's an Ames and a Walmart within a radius of 3 miles of each other over there. They're very aggressive people. They have a BJ's and a tire shop going into that area over there shortly, and a bank came in last March. The mall is well kept. You know, it was a snowy day when I was over there. It was plowed, so, you know, they do business real well in the community. Your Honor?
Yes, John.
I do have a resolution prepared tonight in regards to the development of the River Glen Square, and I'd like Joe to read it and get a little input from the council, and I'd like to take a vote on it, and get, public input as to this resolution and what we're standing by, for the city of Fulton and what's in the best interest of the whole community.
Okay.
So, Joe, would you please read the resolution?
Whereas the town board of the town of Valney did at its meeting on February 11th, 1993, adopt a resolution opposing the possible annexation by the city of Fulton of real property situate in the town of Valney proposed for the River Glen Square Mall. And whereas the city of Fulton is desirous of making the proposed River Glen Square Mall a reality, as it will increase the employment opportunities, the municipal tax base, the sales tax base for the city of Fulton, and general economic activity for the town of Valney and the greater Fulton area. Whereas the annexation of the city of Fulton of the subject real property is a viable legal alternative in accordance with the procedures outlined in Section 700 of the General Municipal Law. Now therefore be it resolved as follows. 1, that the Common Council supports the River Glen Square Mall project and believes it's beneficial, necessary, and proper for the overall economy of the city of Fulton and surrounding townships. And 2, that the Common Council would enthusiastically accept a petition for annexation filed under Section 702 of the General Municipal Law from the owners of the real property on which the River Glen Square Mall would be situate. And 3, that the Common Council will work diligently and with all deliberate speed to encourage the annexation of the River Glen Square Mall. And 4, that the Common Council retains its desire to reach a negotiated settlement with the town of Valney, provided that such settlement is within the overall public interest of the city of Fulton.
Comment? Ron?
John, does that mean you're going to try to, Larry and Bruce come before you and say they want the land annexed by the city, that means the city will go to court to try to annex land by force?
That's basically what it's saying. I mean, we can settle this before it goes that far, but the potential is there for something like that.
Probably part of the reason why is afraid because of a law like that. You got to build the trust. You're not building the trust with a resolution like this. See, this is the type of thing where anybody can walk in and say, we want to be in the city. And the city wants to fight for it. This is what I can understand why the town would be afraid of something like this. We have to have this agreement, and we need this agreement. It's got to be done through the basis of trust, and not through force. I think this is a terrible resolution, and I don't think it should be even put to a vote.
You sound like a National Guard.
Well, Ron's right. I just, you know what I mean? I think
Ron?
the city and the towns have to work for years and years and years to come. To start out on this foot was the wrong foot.
Ron, we've been trying to do that for the last several months.
Stop trying to, but to do it this way,
Yeah, but
even if you got the law to one,
Yeah, but-
set it back even farther.
Yeah, but you see, we're under a short time span, and we want to get this, settlement as fast as possible. And maybe this will encourage them to come back
No,
when we're.
it's going to make them dig in their heels. It's human spirit to fight.
They've already...
They already took a vote at their last meeting.
We're trying to do what's in the best interest of the community involved. You have to understand that that's what this resolution is
But it's
about,
not in
Ron.
the best interest of the community in the future. It's not.
But Ron,
I'd like to know why that FAP is supposed to be so big and almighty has never took a stand on this whole area.
Ron, what is the future? As far as I can see, the future is very simple, according to Valney. You give us the water and sewer, and we give you zip.
And let me just say this, Ron, that the Wide Water Groups is also investigating another alternative, possibly, that, we wouldn't get any revenue from in building their own sewage treatment plant there. Also, so this is protecting the interests of the city of Fulton.
Did they build a sewage treatment plant over our aquifer?
I don't know that.
I mean, our water was under that.
I know that these
No,
are
it's matter.
things that they've said in the newspaper, and I've talked to them personally on the telephone. So
They couldn't do it anyway, John, because we have drilling rights there.
I know what you're trying to do, John. I realize there's a time frame of March 1st or whatever for Kmart, but it's...
Yeah, but Ron, they're not offering us anything.
Somehow, somebody's got to be able to give...
Somehow,
We've
do you have any
tried.
idea what we've tried to do and how long we've tried to negotiate this?
We sat in a meeting, Jim Rice and Jim Myers and I, along with two other council members and the county officials and the county legislators, for about 3 or 4 hours.
4 hours.
And it's just a stalemate.
Well, see, and well, did they give you any reasons why not?
Well,
Ron, what do you think
Well,
I've been saying for half an hour?
well, I asked the question, you know, what are you losing? And I didn't get a response from Howard Rose and or Claudia Smart at that time.
Do you want to know what
Only
the problem
stand to
is?
benefit by it.
You ought to know what the problem is. They're afraid they won't be reelected. That's what the problem is. Maybe they won't, but I'm sure that's what's in foremost in their minds right now.
No one realized that Armstrong and Norris are both going for the assessment reductions next year? And then if they win these reductions, their taxes are going to jump skyrocket?
You're making your statements, but right now we're going through the process of that election. Take that going through revaluation. Negotiations will be taking place with all of the industries so that any inequities will be taken care of with them. I don't think they'll be unhappy.
Abby?
In other words, their assessments are going to drop.
That's a possibility, yes.
So the property owner's assessments will rise dramatically.
You're saying that, I'm not.
Right, I'm saying that for the town of Valley. The taxes will be going up when Armstrong and Miller have the taxes reduced. By that, maybe you'll wish you had that extra $100,000.
Well, Ron, they've already said they don't need $100,000.
Maybe next year they will be.
Ron, that was done in a faith, a goodwill type of thing with them, that hypothetical situation of the $100,000 that the county was working on to try to get some kind of movement out of these people. Not only that, but the egress that would take place on 481 would open up a development area beyond that mall. It would be unbelievable asset to the town of Valley, which again is a stronger tax base as well as the 400 jobs. So I don't know what they're looking for, but I don't believe that they have the best interest of the county and the people that live in the area in the county at interest at all. I really don't.
Abby?
If we were to go ahead with the resolution, given the March 1st deadline of Whitewater, is it feasible that anything could be decided? I mean, must it be annexed before Whitewater can go ahead, or would the intent just going through the process and taking it to the court be enough for them, given the premise that supposedly we would come out on top with this?
Well,
Is it feasible?
if you do it with what we call an order to show cause, which is a fast way of getting into court, and they feel that maybe they can extend the deadline because something tangible is being done, yeah, I think that's possible.
Yeah, they're under deadlines to Kmart, and they have to meet those. They're under the gun, is what they are.
Time parameters, are we just spinning wheels and making empty?
Yeah, what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? Yeah.
Is it costly?
Oh, Spencer can do that.
I mean, is it costly financially?
To bring this action? No, that's something that the city attorney can do. Dave?
One of the things that nobody has said, we have, yes, as a town, rejected annexation as a viable solution. There are other solutions, and one of them nobody is willing to talk about. We, the town and the county, are perfectly willing to share the taxes that can be developed from the shopping mall on an equal basis.
But can they get that through the county legislature, was our argument.
For the city.
Can they get that through the county legislature? There's no guarantee that they can get the approval through the legislature for it to fly. That's one of the things we talked about at our meeting when we were there for 4 hours.
But you're rejecting it out of hand. I say it will be done. I say it can be done. It is a viable option. Nobody is talking about it. But I'm saying it will be done. It can be done. The town will go along with it. We will share taxes. The county will share taxes.
That's only the legislature. Dan, that's only the property taxes that we would be sharing. The proposal for proposed sales tax that they would collect was between $300,000 and $500,000. If a majority of that came from the city, we would be losing a lot more in sales tax than what we would be collecting in property tax. And that's what we're afraid of losing.
It's not just the dollars in sales tax, it's the unfair competition between James Wayne, Woolworths, and the rest of the stores at 7%,
But
and Kmart at 4%.
that's why the sales tax would be going, or we would be losing the sales tax.
Because the people were shopping, the sales tax was cheaper.
That's true. And your grocery stores are a big part of it.
Sales tax.
You know. Yeah. If you have right. And you can't blame the consumer for going for the best bang for their buck either. You know.
I called the New York Conference of Mayors last week and explained the situation to their law department and asked if there was any other way of getting some kind of an agreement and whereby we wouldn't be losing the sales tax, and they said that the only way would be through annexation. There isn't any other kind of agreement. I mean, obviously they're not going to pay us, a ton of volume wouldn't be paying us $300,000 to $500,000 to make up for what we could be losing in sales tax.
Yeah, I'll bet. Heavy?
John mentioned earlier that we did not immediately annex the property that James Way sits on, but they have always collected the 3% sales tax. How was that accomplished?
No, they collect the city sales tax there. Okay, originally when that mall was going to be built, it was going to be in the town of Granby. But when they came to, at that time, the mayor was Percy Patrick, they came to him and they asked him for water and sewer. And Percy said, well, you can have all the water and sewer basically you want, but that mall project's going to be in the city of Fulton because you're going to be hurting our budget and hurting our merchants downtown, in the business downtown. Right. Right, the building. Well, not all the parking lot, Ron. 2.5 acres of that parking lot is in the town of Granby. Pyramid owns 8.51 acres in the town of Granby total.
In fact, I have a letter from Jim Best, supervisor in the town of Granby, supporting annexation. And these are the notes he made, the letter he sent to me, the advantages of it. 300 to 400 jobs, Route 481 interchange expansion, opening up 40 acres of Volney land for industrial expansion and or housing with availability of sewer water, possible $40 million in development over the next 10 years. Volney taxpayers will immediately realize a $100,000 a year reduction in their taxable assessed valuation. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned, that with the city owning that, the city is responsible for the infrastructure involved there. If that were built in the town and was part of the town would have to take care of all that, take care of the roads, take care of the plowing, and all the rest of the work that involves maintenance of any development in their town. So that more than just the tax they'll be getting back, and further development of more property. That's right.
Yeah. Plus that too, we also have another development within the city of Fulton, across the street from the mall, that's waiting to see what happens between Volney and Fulton.
Yes.
Also.
Another inn wishes to locate across from the mall in Fulton if that comes to pass. It's going to blossom out into a lot more development than just the mall. You know, it's going to be the kind of development that you're seeing happening further south, and inevitably is going to happen down here. It all depends on when you're going to decide to do it. Ron?
George, would those services be extended to the acreage that would also be included, other than the mall, the Raleigh property?
Our services? No, we can only service what belongs to the city of Fulton.
That extend...
Are you talking about water and sewer?
Yes.
Yeah.
We extend that, but how about the services, the city services?
You mean like garbage collection, fire?
Police,
No.
water?
No, all you can
No.
provide is water and sewer. We can't provide anything else. No, that's a can of worms. Ross?
Mr. Myers, did you find out what the almond pay was in the town?
Ross, we're not talking.
I'm talking about that, you just...
Ross, after we're through with this topic, then I'll open it up for anything else.
Oh, I thought you were through with it, George, sorry.
No, I'll give us a signal.
Mr. Myers, straight in the corner.
Like you're out.
Yeah, just like you were when I used to call.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Ross?
In reference to what Ron said, you know, the entire council and the town board has never sat down and talked face to face. We've never negotiated, even though, you know, we read things in the paper. Some of us on the council never sat with them. We were never invited or weren't able to go because we can only send so many people. Maybe we shouldn't create ill will. We should talk, maybe negotiate. Mr. McFarland said that they're willing maybe to negotiate. We've never talked to them.
Dave, do your board want to sit down with us? Give me a date, and I'll call a special meeting. I mean, not tonight, but if you want to call me tomorrow.
All right.
Okay?
Whitewaters has never talked to some of us on the council either.
Well, we'll
For
call
proposals.
Whitewaters and have them come too.
I think they should all be there.
Okay?
And then you could say you made an honest effort.
Sounds like a good idea.
On paper, some real figures, on projected sales tax losses that the city would lose if it was at 4%. Your projected sales tax revenue.
Pretty much already did.
But make sure it's on paper and there's copies for everybody, so everybody can see in black and white exactly what they stand to gain and what they stand to lose, both parties. And make sure you talk about making the agreement so that it has to be by majority of both boards that are rescinded.
Well, Ron, you can be here. We'll provide as many figures as we can find at that time. Do you want to hold that motion for that
No,
meeting?
I'd still like to vote on it.
Want to vote on it? We're going to have a meeting to try to finish this budget.
Well, should we, I mean,
We can always do that in a special meeting.
Let's do it at a special meeting.
Yeah, just hold the vote.
oh, okay. You're asking for, okay, that's no problem.
Yeah, if we can.
Okay. All right, that's the end of that debate. We're going to hold the vote on that resolution until the special meeting. Now, Ross, you're on. You're welcome.
Did you find out what the pay for the almond was, Jimmy? Of the sewer almond?
John has that in a book put out by NICOM.
Well, the Fulton,
I think it was $8,900.
yeah, you're pretty close to it. It's 84 or something, Jeff. But I don't know if anybody interested, but the budget of the Fulton is about a third less than in Oswego. So if you take a look at that, Mr. Myers, you can see why.
The budget for Fulton is a third less than Oswego?
No, it's a third. Oswego's 3 times as much as Fulton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but this is what we're saying. They got so many. You can see why they're fanning theirs down in the city. They've got so many. They got an officer for an officer, like in the board of education. They got a coach for a coach, and an assistant for an assistant. And another thing.
Well, I don't think we're involved with the Board of
No,
Education.
I'm just giving an example, George.
Oh, okay.
Brother. Time.
Sorry, Ross.
Mario put a cap on all salaries for a while. Then before she left office, she opened it up again. I suggest that we put a cap on the salaries and stop the raising, because you keep raising these people's pay. Like, example, you got one for $43,000 right now, and if you keep raising it, it's going way out of sight. There's not nobody really worth $43,000 in the city of Fulton, as far as I'm concerned.
You realize that most of this was done before we took office.
I understand.
All right. Just want to be sure.
Another thing, civic duty of the alderman is for the city not to worry about your pay. You didn't come around and say to me, I want this job because I need the
Ross, let me
$5,000.
ask you something. Let me ask you something. Did you get paid when you umpired softball?
If you call it pay, yeah.
Did you get paid?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got paid. And the
Okay.
amount of times I volunteered.
How many years did you play softball?
How many years?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to tell you, George, because that'd be telling you how old I am, and you're about the same where it is.
Oh, I don't mind. Everybody knows how old I am.
Okay, anyway, the idea is...
I can even ski free.
The idea is with this. You didn't come around and say to me, Ross, I want the job for $5,000. I want the job. The job was for a civic duty to the city. When the job comes to the point you worry about the money, then get the hell out.
Wait, no, I want to say something. I say that when a man is paid 11 cents an hour, there's something wrong, civic duty or not. Okay? And that a man is worth his hire. Now, I think if you figure out what you were paid per hour as umpire in softball, a game that you loved, we all loved, that you'll find that you made a heck of a lot more than they're making. And I think they're worth a raise.
I'm working $1 a game, George.
For what?
$1.50 a game when I first started.
Yeah, well, that was when $1.50 was worth $1.50.
That's right, George.
Okay. Thank you, Ross.
Ross,
Rod?
I'd like to say something about what Ross was saying. I did a study on towns our size, 18 different towns around New York State that are our size, and looking at all our department heads and what they're being paid. And they're being paid right at about the average of what other towns our size are paying their city officials. So no one in the city is very overpaid or underpaid by position.
But I guess my question is, are those affluent communities, or are those communities similar to Fulton?
There are communities that are similar than Fulton. I left out the Westchester counties and the Suffolk counties that pay their department heads a lot of money. We're talking about towns like Gloversville, which is not an affluent community, Corning.
Can't keep it up.
I'm not advocating raises. I'm just telling you that our department heads are being paid on the average of what every other town in New York State our size is being paid.
Let's cap it right where it is right now. At 48,000, 43,000, that's high enough.
And I'm also not necessarily advocating a raise for myself. I didn't come in this for the money.
I've got to find candidates to run for office, and it'd be a lot easier to pay them more money.
We all do a lot of things for the community, and I have in the past, and when I got into this job, it wasn't for the money.
Ross, I want you to know I'm not asking for a raise either. How do you mean that, Ross? You gotta be careful about these public statements, you know. The implications might be other than what you think they are.
They find you floating somewhere else.
Remember, you're being taped. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, Tracy. George, so back to this.
Yes.
In this incident that happened with the commissioner and myself, is it considered he's on duty?
Wait a minute. Why are you bringing that up here now?
Because I want to ask you a question.
Well, then you ask it in private.
All right.
Okay? Anybody else? Anybody have anything you want to bring before the council? Okay. Motion to adjourn to executive session.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
No, I can project onto that wall.
This is OJT.
The alternative is going to, and I know that he hasn't said he
Circle, half a circle.
It looks like that. Not as far, not as far.
Pick it up.
And when we talk about light, we talk about that being a mirror. Well, you asked if there was physics.
I was kidding.
It's a parabolic magnifier. I know.
Please. As we begin tonight's meeting, you need to know that in case of a fire emergency, if you would exit the room in a timely and orderly fashion, move down the stairway and away from the building. I would also like to ask everyone to please speak up tonight due to the large crowd. If we would, everyone please speak up a little bit so that we can be heard. Would you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
Request that item 10, personnel, be tabled till after item 13, executive session, as there are some questions asked of me that would need executive session time before we take action on the personnel recommendations.
Any discussion on that? If not, Resolution 1 is amended then?
Move it. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions. That brings us to the public forum section of our meeting, which is an opportunity for anyone in the public to address the board. If there is anyone that would like to speak to the board at this time, would you please step forward, state your name?
Up here, right here is fine. Okay. I was here 2 weeks ago, gave you information with a letter stating that there was a problem out to Valmy School.
We know who you are, but for the other people, would you identify yourself?
Lynn Lyons. I guess there was a misunderstanding as to my concern about this. Although my concerns are with Linda's health, my concerns are for myself being an employee out there, and also for the 600 some odd children there, and the 100 adults that are working there also. I believe there's an air quality problem out there. I have done some research myself. I have requested some from Mr. Hammond. He has given me some MSDS forms. The problem started basically after the holidays. They did strip and seal the floor in the gym and in the cafeteria. Now, some of these forms I've quickly reviewed. I haven't really looked at all of them. basically all of them on here state keep out of reach of children, which I'm sure they're put somewhere safe. But if they're supposed to be kept out of reach of children, we have these chemicals in a building where there are all children. A lot of the symptoms here, well, one of them here they use, which is for a moth treatment. It says excessive inhalation can cause dizziness, headaches, respiratory tract irritation, and unconsciousness. Most of these here state all these same things. Now, we're using them in the schools daily. Whether people are drinking them down, which I'm assuming they're not, they are being inhaled, okay? Because if they're on the floor, they're going to remain there for a while. Another one of my concerns also is the clean air intake, which circulates around the school. I believe there is a vent that is in front of the school. The buses unload there. You've got all the bus fumes that, again, that will circulate through the building throughout the day. That's a major concern of mine. I'm concerned because I don't want anybody else to get ill, okay? Symptoms arise not out of just finding new products brought into the school, but your immune system breaks down eventually from having all these chemicals in a building and will make some people sick at some time. I guess last week or 2 weeks ago when I gave you the letter, I wanted to be kept informed. I guess none of you has really realized my great concern for myself and for the children there. Although I do care about, how Linda's doing also. What I'd like you to do is to take some steps to find out what is being done to take care of this problem. I do feel that there's a problem out there, and I would like to see something being done about it.
Our primary concern is for the welfare, the safety and welfare of
I
our children and
understand
our
that.
employees. And as you know, we meet on a 2-week basis. And 2 weeks ago in executive session, we had over an hour discussion, and Mr. Wall was present. And we put out a lot of ideas on the table as to what we should be doing, and tonight we'll receive feedback. I mean, we met last week, but we did not have an executive session. It was a special workshop for budget purposes. And tonight, as part of our executive session, we will be brought up to date as to some of the things that we discussed as to what we should be looking for, things like that.
I think that's fine. I think you're doing a wonderful job with it, but I myself would like to be kept informed about it, as I stated in the letter. I believe I have a great stake in this too, because I do work out there. Also, there's the children. Another question I want to know about is the ventilation system out there. I know that their filters are changed periodically. I'm concerned with when the whole ventilation system itself was cleaned. I know that was a previous problem in Fairgrave, and I would like someone to check on that too. And again, I can't stress enough, I would like to be kept abreast about all this. I'm very concerned.
And rightfully so. We certainly don't deny the fact that, you're
Communication
concerned.
is a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is, and understand, when we only meet twice a week, it's hard for us to communicate back to you, and we, as a group, have not been updated. I mean, we will do that later tonight.
Okay, and also, I wondered, all right, I've come to you and I stated my case. Is there anyone else that I should go to ask my questions to, too? I mean, I don't know exactly where I will get a lot of answers from. And I've called different people and been told, no, call this one, no, call this one, no, call this one. Who is in charge of this problem?
I
You are, okay. May I meet with you?
Of course.
Okay.
And I have not had any conversation with you. In terms of the status, it may be appropriate with board indulgence to ask people that are prepared with some updates on where we are to share those right now. Being informed is not a problem. The issue is I may not necessarily know who has the questions. They have to come forward and ask for whatever it is they want. It's not a problem. The ability to know who needs to hear these things or be informed, because you're talking about some routine procedures on safety of children, air quality,
and we don't necessarily inform people every time we institute
Well,
some of
because
these.
there is a problem out there, that's
some of
why
these
I would like to
routine.
have informed, that's why I'm requesting it.
Oh, you as an individual or people, again, we will address how we will inform employees and how we will inform the public when and if we are confirmed that we have problems. I know in your opinion, there's a problem. Therefore, there's a problem. Whether there is or not, from the district's point of view, is stuff that we are still researching, no question about that. Wayne, can you, at this particular point, maybe contribute something to the interest that's been raised here?
In terms of this issue and the concerns expressed, we, really can't comment on any medical people, any the personnel themselves. We can talk about the overall treatment of how we go about dealing with concerns. Joe Hammond, who is our safety and risk compliance officer for the district, who the overall safety of the district and of the students and staff is in his area of responsibility. And I'd like to ask Joe to share with the public and the board, what we have done and what we do in terms of these types of issues. Joe?
Joe, are you going to take us through the routine procedure for how we initiate these investigations?
Okay. I'll start out. 4 years ago, before I arrived at this school, there was a system in place to deal with in-school environmental problems because of a few indoor air quality problems that the district had to deal with at that time. The method at the time was, if there was an indoor air quality complaint, a form was filled out. This form was taken to an in-house committee. It was discussed within that school. Then the facts were brought to the district level, to the superintendent of buildings and grounds, to Wayne's office, and the problem was dealt with in that way. What's happened over the years is that indoor air quality is an area. If you talk to a professional, they'll laugh about it. They say it's more of an art than a science, but it is evolving, and it's becoming more and more complicated all the time. The early indoor air quality investigations were really based on two different studies. One came out of Maryland, and I have a copy of that, and another one came out of the EPA. I've attended the last couple of years, and both technologies were discussed. Basically, what you look for in indoor air quality investigation, you're looking for things that really don't belong in that school. Pesticides, hazardous material, mold, mildew, dirty filters. So what we've done, I've worked with, and when I speak, I've worked with Dave Sturgis, Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds in this district. I've worked with the Superintendents of Buildings and Grounds in the Central Square School District, Bernie Miller. One of the first things we did about 1.5 years ago is we sat down and we developed our own preventive maintenance plan for the HVAC systems for our schools. We looked into buying some plans. They were inadequate for what we could afford, and for the ones that looked good, they were $10,000, $12,000. So we sat down, designed one, took the information to a computer programmer, and developed our own program. We've since then deferred some of our initial costs by selling this program to other schools. Where we are at in this school district right now is that we're just beginning to implement this computerized plan. And what this does, this will account for the cleaning and changing of filters, the cleaning of and servicing of different types of equipment. I do agree with Mrs. Lina on one point that she said, is that when all is said and done, I think that any indoor air quality problem, before you say that there is no problem or the problem is over, the HVAC system has to have a clean bill of health. By that I mean, if you had a mold problem in the school, you get rid of the source of the mold, you still may have mold within the ductwork. If you have a dust problem and you've corrected that problem, you still may have dust in the ductwork. So I think before this is all over, we will have to look at if this is a possibility, not only in Bonnelly, but in other schools. And a lot of other school districts are facing the same problem. Okay, so where we are at present is that we've also developed in the last couple of years, and this is a topic that Wayne and I are proud of, that is, hopefully someday we'll do a board presentation, is that we've developed an integrated pest management program in this district. When you look look at an indoor air quality investigation, one of the biggest questions on that questionnaire is that, were there pesticides used? Or when was the last time pesticides used? Well, we don't use pesticides in this district anymore. And if we do, it's outside on an athletic field on a limited basis, but inside the building for the last year, we have eliminated the use of pesticides. It's been a arduous task, is because we've had to find substitutes for a lot of chemicals that we've relied on for years. But we've done that. So with those two major points, with working with the science departments and custodial departments of getting the hazardous waste out of the schools, I think that a lot of the symptoms that you're looking for in an indoor air quality investigation, we've very slowly and subtly eliminated those possibilities. Where we are right now is that we're, in a sense, coming together in this respect with the formation of the safety committee and a subcommittee dealing with indoor air quality problems. I think as a group, rather than dealing with each problem and maybe in a somewhat disjointed manner, is that we will set down procedures. This has been a task that Wayne has given to me to present to the first safety committee meeting, is a set procedure of not only how we deal with indoor air quality problems, but how we deal with any environmental problems. Because one of the issues at Volney actually could not, or it may not be an indoor air quality problem. It may be a sensitivity to chemical problem, which really requires a whole different approach. So hopefully through the safety committee that we will have an established protocol to deal with these different types of problems.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Could you define what you mean by a chemical sensitivity problem and how you would treat that different than an indoor air quality problem? How would you separate the two?
Well, if someone is suffering from a reaction to a mold problem in school, and this is an ongoing problem in most schools, we will seek out the source of that mold, where it is, and either through mechanical methods or otherwise try to eliminate that source of mold, usually like through a super cleaning effort, and we'll just clean it up, dry it out, and eliminate the source of mold. We can identify the problem and we can deal with it. The problem that we have in addressing multiple chemical sensitivities cases is that where do you start? In Volney alone, we use over 400 different chemicals for different purposes. If a person is diagnosed with MCS, and we have to address that, unless the doctor can focus in on a few of those chemicals, we have to consider any one of those 400 as contributing to that condition. So that makes the process very complicated.
But why would you need 400 separate chemicals in a room, in a building with children, that someone could get MCS? You don't get MCS. That's how you get MCS, by being exposed to a lot of chemicals. It's not, I have MCS, therefore I have to stay away from chemicals. Chemicals cause the MCS.
Well,
so why do you have a school building with 400 different kinds of chemicals? Why do you need 400 different kinds of chemicals in a school building? For any reason. Give me one good reason why you need 400 different chemicals in a school building.
Especially when some of them tell you the hazards that these do.
some of the chemicals...
You know what all of them say? They all say keep out of reach of children. That is so scary.
That doesn't mean touching. That means breathing.
On behalf of the board, can we have the lady...
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Jerry Hogan. I was a member of the Air Quality Task Force, and I really like what you said about the work you've done. However, there's a lot of work that did not get done that I'm more concerned with right now.
Excuse me, at this particular time, are there other outside agencies or resources that you would bring in to assist us in this venture?
Getting back briefly to MCS and looking at chemical problems, a lot of people are very quick to say, let's test the air, let's test the school. You're right, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And you can spend thousands of dollars, you can misspend thousands of dollars that you could otherwise spend to improve the conditions of the school on worthless investigation. What we've decided to do is one of the steps at Volney is that we've asked the Department of Labor to come and assist us. It's a service that they provide. They will come in and meet with any group of people and discuss the problem ahead of time. We're going to do a walkthrough through Volney School, and possibly that day we'll even do some air tests such as carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide would show any fault in the HVAC system as far as combustibles inside the building. Carbon dioxide would show a lack of ventilation throughout the building itself.
And that seldom will show anything above standards.
Right.
That's usually,
At the same time, 150-pound white male is dealing with children.
Most of the problems that you're going to have when you start dealing with indoor air quality problems and MSDS sheets, the information on MSDS sheet is usually based on industrial standards. I think the industrial standard for carbon dioxide is around 5,000. Around 2,700 parts per million, not many people can stay awake. We've seen levels approaching that in other school districts where there's a horrible indoor air quality problem, where there's no ventilation. I think that if we do test and if we find any levels 700, 800 or above, it should set off some alarms that maybe we should look at our HVAC system. But I can't say that now, and we've scheduled John Haney from the Department of Labor, who's an industrial hygienist, to do our investigation for us. The earliest time we could schedule that's in early March 9th. So,
If we had the air quality task force set up, by then, the subcommittee of the safety group, could a couple people in the air quality task force, I don't know if they have full-time jobs, what, accompany the inspection? I think a lot of it's getting down to communications, and I hate to say trust, but maybe a little bit of that too. But if the State Department guy is the expert, I have to defer to your judgment that he is, that the task force is set up air quality, the subcommittee, the safety committee, or that a couple other people accompany them on the inspection. I mean, if they have two people that are experts, I figure why not more the merrier? Because everybody wants the same end result anyways. I mean, there's no one-upmanship. It's like the end results or whatever everybody's after.
and this is also not to say that the board may decide to hire another industrial hygienist as a second opinion. You're going to have to pay that person. The advantage of bringing in the Department of Labor, their service is free. Part of the catch of their service is that if they do see any violation, the district will be cited. But we have enough confidence in what we see in the buildings that we'll take that chance.
how about your insurance carrier? Usually they'll provide that service free also, and they're very interested in not finding any problems because they're the ones ultimately will have to pay, so that might be a resource that you want.
That's part of our safety committee was we have a representative from the insurance company who will be part of the committee who will
But I think the safety committee is a very good idea, but it seems to me that's an after the fact.
This
I think you
happened
need
before all that, and I
Yeah.
think we ought to leave the two parts, the two things separate. Let's get this taken care of. It's great we're doing the safety committee and the other, get that going, but we need to concentrate on this school right at this point.
I still don't like the idea of 400 chemicals in a school building for any reason.
Joe, would sodium chloride be considered a chemical that has an MSDS form?
Oh, sure. So would Crayola crayons.
Yep.
Yes, and
So
they're...
a lot of
And
benign products is that every product that's in that building is made out of chemicals, and we have an MSDS for it, or I'm saying most of them. That's why the 400 sounds like a lot. There are some products that we use in schools. By their nature, they can be hazardous.
But chlorine...
What makes a product hazardous is a misstorage or misuse. And that goes along with the rest of the right to know programs.
I don't believe that to be true.
Yeah, that's not necessarily
No.
true because, you know, if you mop a floor with chlorine bleach, that's putting a noxious element in the air.
You have this dust mop treatment you put on the dust mop. The janitor goes in, does all the floors. That's going to stay on the floor.
And in the air.
And in the air. And if you read what this can do to people, it's distressful.
Thank you very
So
much.
don't tell me you've got to, just induce it. It's there.
Another follow-up to what we do in terms of handling concerns of employees is that we do monitor at the building level, student attendance, any type of absenteeism in terms of staff, and also we have our school nurses who monitor these. And for instance, at Volney, maybe Mr. Watt can make a comment or two about, what the records have been at his building in terms of with his nurse and what you have seen in your building this year.
Yeah, I think we're concerned with the situation, obviously. And we have been checking to see if we've been having an outbreak of problems in the building. We've not identified anybody else having any other major problems they would normally be having. People who have allergies have allergies. I have not seen...
Wow, excuse me.
Please,
I'm sorry.
he allowed you to speak, and I don't mean to be rude, but...
From what I know, we've asked people if they've been having problems. We've asked the staff. I think we try to communicate as best as possible with our part-time help that is where the problem originated. We haven't seen a major problem other than the one individual who's had a problem. People have, I think there were 2 people who indicated that they thought something might be wrong. They were seen by a doctor, and I think he gave, I can't tell you what the outcome of that. I assume that he looked at them and recorded their problems at that point. We've also been checking and keeping track of our attendance rate and see if we're experiencing any downtrend. In fact, when the problem occurred, our attendance was considerably higher than it was last year at that time for our student population. So we haven't seen a sick building syndrome at this point in terms of people being sick. We're looking, and maybe it'll occur, but we're not seeing it at this point.
Now, Linda, if you want to make a comment, please. I don't mean to cut you off, but I hadn't heard this, and that's feedback that we need as to how the attendance is at our building.
Well, we've had 2 people that have become very ill out there. No, they have not come forward. We have one that's been diagnosed with bronchitis, then pneumonia. Now she's back to bronchitis again. She is now out of school. This has gone on since December 1st. We have another one that is out right now that just got sent to a heart-lung specialist because she's had so many problems. So,
Are their own homes being checked? This has only happened since
this is
people
only
have been in
right.
Could you identify yourself?
My name is Art Thurlow. I'd like to ask Mr. Wall and the nursing staff, how many times a young child from kindergarten to 6th grade comes to the nurse's office, says he got a headache. It's not a major problem. It's not major at all. But how many times do they come and it gets dismissed as just a plain headache when it could be something else? Fumes. It could be related to the problem, but it's dismissed because it's a simple headache. Or nauseous. Like one of the kids comes up and they're sick. They say, oh, it's a flu symptom. But couldn't it be related to the problem, if there is a problem?
If there is a problem, I'm sure.
Is it being...
All those things are being looked at. Everything is being logged as to identifying anything that could possibly be different now.
Is there a history of a log that'll show how many kids come in for a headache?
Before the incident.
Why isn't there? There should be common practice to log everything down.
Your school nurses log every child that comes into their office.
That's right.
They log why the child was there, the date, and the time. So there is logs in all the schools. And I'm sure they're checking them all.
Excuse me, I'm Linda Thurlow, and I worked in the nurses' room at Volney for 4 years. And every time a child comes into the nurses' room complaining of a headache, it is not written down. And if you look back and you see now all the different problems that have been going on, and how sick I got, and rushed to the hospital twice, have broken out with a rash, the doctor has told me it doesn't just occur overnight. It has been years that it affects your immune system. And I started out over a year ago with a rash on the back of my neck after I entered into Volney School in September and had it through the whole month, or the whole year. The summertime, it cleared up. Then I came back, and I had no skin on either hand. The nurse and the principal saw it, and then it affected underneath my arm, around my breast, and my stomach. Now, when you get these pamphlets on chemicals and what they do to you, the day that I was taken to the hospital, I went into the nurse's room, and I was only in the building maybe 5 minutes, and I started coughing real hard, could hardly breathe. Before I walked down to the end of the hall to get to my classroom, I stopped into the nurse's room, and I told her I was having a hard time breathing and coughing. She turned around and said to me, "It sounds like you're getting the flu." And I said, "No, there's something I think's here. And that was left. I went back to my classroom. I took the kids down the gym, or down to the lunchroom. I started getting an awful headache, burning of the throat, that my throat felt like it was on fire. I went back, after I brought the kids in from outside, I felt better. I brought the kids in, the coughing persists. I went back to the nurse's room and I told her I was having an awful time breathing. My lungs were filling up, I was gasping for breath. She didn't say much about it, she just ignored it and figured it was a cold that I was catching. And I told her, no, I'm gasping for breath, I think there's something wrong. Went back down to the kindergarten room again, I walked into the library, it got worse. By that time, she was walking behind me, coming from the hall, and she said, Linda, go into the nurse's room. I think there's something wrong. So I went into the nurse's room. By that time, she kept having me drink water, and I must have got like 6 glasses of water, this size, of water down me, when all of a sudden I started vomiting this white, clear, yellow, mucus-like. By that time, I had hardly no breath at all. She had called Mr. Wall, the principal. He came in, and he was going to take me home. And then he asked me, do I want to go over to the hospital or not? I thought I would be fine. Well, it wasn't even a 1-minute conversation when he said, maybe we ought to go to the hospital. I said, yes. Then she said, call the ambulance. At that time, I thought I wasn't even going to make it. I went over to the hospital by the ambulance, and I was there almost 3.5 hours with such burning to the throat. And so I'm just trying to say I experienced this. And to me, I don't feel this is just occurring. I feel this has been going on in the school for a while. There has been kids over and over and over that have complained about headaches, that have complained about nausea. And it's overlooked. And I think it should have been checked on, because we had a child at Volney School that had an asthma problem. She was rushed to the hospital a couple of different times like me. But they thought it was due to her allergies, because she had such a hard time with allergies. And if you look back and you go through all these different logs of the different kids that have had problems, there's been a lot of kids that have had a lot of nosebleeds too. And I don't think it's anything that should just be looked at and brushed under the rug. I think this is a drastic, serious problem. And I don't think anything would have been done, because I had the rash on my hands, and only that, when I came back to school, after I was rushed to the hospital, I came back because I wanted to make sure it was something to do with school. I went in to have a meeting with Mr. Waugh, Gene Breslin, and Lynn Lyons. There was nothing on my hands. I showed the nurse and Mr. Waugh. My hands were clear. By the time I had gone back and forth to Volney School, off and on, being sick, they asked me to go to Fairgrave School, too. I agreed. Okay, let's try Fairgrave. I went to Fairgrave, and as I entered the building, they were checking my lungs, front and back, checking my blood pressure and pulse, and by the time I left those buildings, I was all filled up and couldn't hardly breathe, and had such a headache. I vomited. I had such a drastic headache. I vomited Wednesday, the last day I worked at Fairgrave, the whole day, and the next day, and all that came out of me was dark brown stuff. And I had such a headache. Well, I called the doctor back that took care of me at the emergency room, and he said, do not enter the buildings. And only that, my hands all broke out. Right now, they look fine. But I had no skin on my hands again. But they were fine before I left. Now, if I had to enter into the schools again, I would bet that the same thing would happen again.
I'm Kathy Williams. I also work at Volney School, and I have experienced problems. I've had, ever since I started working, I've had a dry, sore throat, burning sensation from my nose right down. I've had dizziness, and I wanted to ask Mr. Blue, Was there a report from Dr. Taft's office?
Yes.
I was one of the ones sent to Dr. Taft's office. Was there a report sent? And what, could I see what the report
I
said?
can't discuss doctor reports, those types of things. If you like to discuss...
But it's for me. I don't care who knows.
Well,
Could I ask that?
It's a personnel.
Okay, why were we sent Taft?
It's the concerns of employees. If we have employees who are injured, fall down on school
Okay,
property,
but
we
what-
would send them to a doctor. If we
What
had-
was he looking for?
He's a school physician.
Okay, but what was he looking
He
for?
was looking to see if there was any indication of any skin rashes or whatever, or any problems with breathing, heart rate, etc., and could refer the people or talk to the people about other doctors that they could go to. The district can
He
refer.
said nothing about doctors. All he asked me, when I walked in there, he asked me, what are you here for? And I explained to him what I was there for. And he said, okay. He checked my ears, my nose, my throat. He did my heart rate, my blood pressure, my height and weight, and checked my hearing. Now, for this, I can see how it proves or disproves anything that went on, especially on a Monday morning when I've had 2 days off of work and hadn't entered the school in 2 days. Now, this shows nothing except for that I was healthy at that time.
Well, what it is, it's a way of addressing concerns by employees. It would have been a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
When we can fit into the doctor's schedule, we can get people to see a doctor, and he can refer people to other specialists. He's a school physician who was hired by the district to attend to employees. Now, we can't make those decisions. We have nurses who can look at people, but they aren't doctors. That's why we have a school physician to refer employees to. If someone falls and needs sutures or whatever, we send them to an emergency room. This type of an area where they're saying they're having problems breathing, their lungs are congested, blood pressure, etc., physician can cover those issues. Granted, he is not a specialist, but he certainly can refer people to specialists, and I'll be very candid with you. I just got the report. I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Okay, am I going to get a copy of this report?
Absolutely. Contact me tomorrow. You can sit down and look at it. Dr. Tapp will discuss it with you. Absolutely.
It's just that we need to get, I don't want to cut anybody short, but we need to go on a few more comments, and then we need to... Go ahead.
All right, I'd like to ask Wayne Blue, since I was told I'd be going to these doctors, I had called his office and told him that I was supposed to be going to a specialist, an allergist, and the remark that he turned around and said when I said that the school district would be paying for it, he turned around and said, we'll see about that. So I'd like to know, am I supposed to be going to an allergist or not?
It's a personnel item, we'll be happy to, with the public forum.
And another thing, I came in this building at 7:05, and I was in here at 5 minutes, and I did nothing but cough. So this young man behind me gave me a cough drop. I was not coughing before I entered this building. I did not have a cold, but my chest is all filled up again, and I had done nothing but cough since I've been in this building.
What are you suggesting?
Well, I suggest there must be something here, too. Because when I left Bounty School and they sent me to Fairgrapes, I got sick. Then I went over to the junior high to watch my son play basketball, and I had a hard time breathing over there. So I would just like to know as soon as possible if there is things that are going to be done around here.
Well, we've tried our best to explain what we are doing, and for many people that will be satisfactory, for some it won't be. It's our intent to do the best we can. There's a lot of people in this room. Each one is bringing in a list of chemicals of which we have no knowledge, and to be able to determine your reaction while sitting here and to its cause and its source is something I wouldn't be able to even profess to come close to do. The point is that all of the things that we have heard, we are taking seriously and we are listening. We will do the best that we can. If you have questions, you've got to ask those questions specifically. And there is no reason to wait for board meetings for us to do the best we can to give you the answers. You've heard the basic procedures of the district and our willingness to bring in any outside help we can get.
You've heard the procedures when we have an employee in one form or another. You may not like the doctor, you may not like the idea, but that's all we can depend on at this particular point. Our intention to have as safe a building as possible. There's no question about that. If I happen to have an allergy to certain perfume, I'd like to be able to say women can't wear those perfumes in the schools, but I am not going to be able to say that. I don't know whose responsibility that is. There is no question that what you raise is a huge problem. No question at all. It's a huge problem. And we will do the best that we can to address our responsibility. Are there other people interested in addressing?
My name is Stephen McCann. I have a question. Are there any chemicals that are used in this district or in these buildings that aren't used anywhere else, so that these people are only having problems in these buildings because they're coming into these buildings? Aren't cleaning chemicals generally a general thing that are used basically everywhere? Is there just a special one that's used in the schools?
That's an outstanding question, and the thing would be to review the list of things that we're using relative to what the norms are. We tend to buy probably very typical chemicals. I know that, I'm going to guess, Joe, the hazardous chemicals rules came into effect where districts were to go through all of their chemicals. I'm a former chemistry teacher, and some of the stuff that we used to have in labs for years and years were no longer relevant to the curriculum. And there was absolutely no way to get rid of that stuff. It was against the law to get rid of it, and it was improper to keep it. So you buy special services to come through your buildings and take those things and properly dispose of them. I have to assume this district has done those things over the years. Certainly, in terms of making decisions for cleaning, chemicals, whatever else we may use, whether it be in labs, frogs are still in formaldehyde, I think. All of those types of things, we don't want them around if there's any alternative. We are sensitive to those things. Does that answer your question?
So basically what he's saying is that you buy them in bulk and distribute them to all the schools, so you're using basically the same cleaning chemicals in all the schools. I think that's right.
No, my question was if there were chemicals being used in these buildings that weren't used in other places. And that's because it's probably a general thing, and they're probably being used in other places besides just the schools.
Joe might have some insight.
There are some products that are commonly used in schools that you probably wouldn't use at home, such as what was mentioned, the gym sealer. This is a maintenance problem that every school district has to address. You only have 2 times during the year that we can seal floors in the gym, and this time of year they desperately need it. That gym floor in Volney actually needs more sealant applied to it now, but we can't get back to it that project again until the summertime. It's because we always pick those times to seal it, let it off gas, and then people will come back in the building. But there are a lot of products, and a lot of products we don't even use. There are new products coming out all the time. As a society, we are bombarded by new products. It's our job, not only as household consumers, but as school consumers, is to be a little selective when we buy. And we've been trying to do that. We have some people from Huntington Labs coming in this week to go over some of our cleaning products and some of the different chemicals that we use to look for safer, less toxic products, if they are available. But the fact is, there are certain tasks that have to be performed, and there are certain chemicals that have to be used to perform that task.
Regardless. My house is very clean, and I don't use any of those chemicals. There are a lot of alternatives. My house is very clean.
We're seeking those out. The problem you have in school is that you take the size of an average house and multiply it by a factor of maybe 20 or 30, and the problems of cleaning become immense. Is that we have graffiti written on walls that you normally wouldn't have written in your house. We have bathroom conditions in the junior high school that you'd never see in a private house, and they have to be dealt with in a special manner. And sometimes the use of special cleaners are employed.
Even though it's going to harm someone else in another way. if they breathe it in. That's, you don't regard that as being as, in other words, it's more harmful for them to read dirty words than it is for them to breathe harmful chemicals.
Well, I'm not an expert in that, and I don't think any district would logically make that trade-off. All I'm saying is, to answer his question, is that, yes, there are certain conditions in school districts that require certain products we would use at home.
The question wasn't so much in school districts, it was, are there any chemicals that this school district is using that other school districts don't use? And if so, districts having the same complaints? Using anything that any other school district wouldn't use? Generally?
No, it may have a different brand label on it, but basically, a graffiti cleaner contains the same chemicals, whether it's an Acme or ABC. It's basically all the same. Most of these products, as they're spec'd out for bidding, contain product information that the companies have to comply with.
So I guess what you're saying, if everybody else uses it, then it's okay.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
Are there any other issues that need to be, or anybody would like to address to the board this time, please? Okay, thank you all for your comments, and I just want to reiterate that we realize the seriousness of the incident, and there has to be some trust between people here. We don't want to cause a panic anywhere in the district, an unnecessary panic, and get people stirred up. We're trying to find a needle in a haystack here. Let's be honest about it with each other. If there is a problem, then we're going to find it and we're going to take care of it, or I won't be sitting here. That's how serious I feel this is. And those of you who know me know my honesty, and that's the best I can do, is ask you to trust us. This is not a cover-up. It's nothing that we're trying to put off because people weren't informed during the week. Some people are upset. I can understand that. Understand that we didn't get the feedback until tonight that we need to hear so that we can continue to address the incident.
I feel the need to add something there, too. What a district like this needs on a problem like this is help, not hammering.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I thought I was trying to do when I addressed you 2 weeks ago.
We need people to be specific in communicating to us and making sure that their questions are clear so that we can get down to the answers, and we will be happy to address that. Public forum is not the best place off the cuff to address anyone's problem. So we need to know what your questions are, and we'll do our best to get answers out to you. Certainly, the information that has been presented was not new today. It's available. We may not fully know who needs it. You've got to help us by asking the questions. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then to the approval of the minutes of the board meeting, January 26th. Resolution 2, please. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed and abstentions. That brings us to the President's report. We have a regular meeting on February 23rd, on March 9th, and March 23rd. Any 23rd. Any comments or questions for Gene on the BOCES minutes? We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
In your packet, as we have started last question, and really, just as a reminder, this is not a recommendation of staffing. It is a preliminary look tied to the kinds of staffing that the administrative team feels that they would like to have to be able to meet the mission that you have placed on. Obviously, and everyone knows, that work has to be done before this staffing list becomes a proposal. However, I would like to take a few minutes to offer the administrators, through Mr. Egan, a chance to comment on what's there regarding their buildings, and also an opportunity for you to make sure that you understand what the information is that you have. Mr. Egan.
I hope it's all right if I sit down. I'll speak up, but I don't think I can stand up. Not enough room to do both of those. Thank you for clarifying. As John mentioned, we have given you in the backup a report on on our instructional staff. It shows both our current FTE levels and our projected levels for next year. And again, I do want to repeat that at this point, this is not a recommendation. This is just information based on our first round of work.
Excuse me, we have a lot of people here who may not know what FTE means.
Okay. FTE is the letters stand for full-time equivalent. So as we talk about the personnel in this report, we may talk about 0.5 of a person, or we may talk about 0.2, or we may talk about 17.5. And what we're talking about is the amount of time that these people collectively work at a particular task.
A combination of full-time, part-time, that adds up to the sum total for full-time equivalents.
Just for an example, this year, our FTE for the entire instructional program is 302.3 FTEs. That really translates out into, I think, 309 people. But so we're not talking about people, we're talking about time on task. We've taken our report and broken it down into the three instructional areas: the elementary, the junior high, and the high school. There are 4 criteria that we use as we think about staffing at the elementary level. Those criteria are the effects of mainstreaming and/or inclusion programs. Those are how our students and our very special programs are able to move in with the regular students for classes during the day, things like that. We have, with the elementary principals, we have an operating rule that we try to make classes smaller at the primary level, which would be grades kindergarten, 1 and 2, if possible. We're always working to stabilize classes within buildings, and movement between the buildings. And finally, we have to pay attention to any contractual guidelines regarding class size. So with those 4 operating rules, we have presented you with this information. I'm not sure at this point, do you want me to put on grade level by grade level, or?
Are there any questions, I guess, from the board members?
An elementary one, just show, you said resource +1, what's for elementary, what's the +1 resource? I understand what a K-3 teacher is, but what's like a resource mean?
A resource teacher is a teacher who works with students with special needs. These needs are identified through the Committee on the Handicapped. The students may be learning disabled, mostly. Would that be a fair
I'm
assessment?
not going to tell you what label is, because it could be almost anything.
Could be almost anything.
That request is driven by state regulations, say how many students a resource teacher may see at the elementary and secondary level. And we're close to going over right now, even with the addition of 1 resource teacher this year at the elementary level. We're projecting the need for another additional resource teacher next year.
Any other questions from the board?
In junior high for foreign language, you have Latin, German, I'm not opposed to foreign language, but does that track where the high school enrollment's going? I mean, are kids going that they're not interested in the German program when they get into the high school? Yeah, we fund to teach at the junior high level. When the kid gets to the high school level, there's no tracking. Or with Latin. Or, like, I know the Spanish enrollment's really high. I don't know.
We offer 4 languages. We offer French, Spanish, Latin, and German. We have, for the last 2 or 3 years, offered all of those 4 languages. Foreign languages, you remember, required enrollment in foreign languages for 2 years. in our district, we've chosen to teach that over grade 8 and grade 9. So the minimum requirement for foreign language for any student in New York State is a minimum of 2 years, sometime between the time they leave grade 6 and sometime before they finish grade 9. We've chosen to do it at 8 and 9. So year 1 of the program is at the junior high. Those kids stay with that language and go to the high school. So the kids who have Latin in the junior high now, they would make up, 99.9% of them would make up the classes in grade 9 the following year.
Is that true right now? Is there any kind of statistical model that would take, I mean, I'm not opposed to foreign language, I'm opposed to like hiring a German teacher for 2 years, the kid gets into high school as a freshman, takes French. And what about, you know, do the enrollments track through?
I feel comfortable that I could show you that the majority of the students, well more than 90% of the students, stick with whatever language they start with at the junior high school.
But we discussed we didn't always offer all of these 4 at the junior high level, so that would be why.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, I didn't understand that part. We began foreign language by starting the Spanish in grade 8. The next year we added French, and then the third year we added both Latin and German. So Spanish has been in the junior high 2 years longer than the other languages.
Doesn't that spread us awful thin to offer all 4 languages? I mean, you're talking about 125 French students, 125 Spanish students, and 70 divided between German and Latin. It would be nice to offer everything to everybody, but is that possible or realistic?
I'm going to answer the question I think you asked, and you may have to ask me again, okay? In terms of grade 8 and grade 9, those 70 kids will have to take a language. They could choose to take German, or we really could choose not to offer German, and then they would be left with some other choices. But the FTE, the amount of time it would take to have a teacher teach that class, is going to remain constant whether for those students, whether we offer German or not.
Okay, so I think part of the question might be, or I'm going to ask again, what do we look like when we look at class size? You know, when we get down to a particular section. In German and in Latin, because they seem to have the lower projections here. So what kind of, are we talking classes of 12, 20, 30?
We would be talking of classes between 15 and 20 in the junior high school.
In the junior high school?
Yeah.
And at the high school level?
At the high school level, the numbers in German, I believe I shared them in your backup, and I can look them up, but they are probably between 10 and 15 at the present time.
We still have to have a certified teacher in German to teach those 10 or 15 kids.
Yep.
Unless we have a dual certification.
And I guess I would also say that with some students who we have already committed to a program in grades 9, 10, and 11, I would argue that we have some responsibility. If we chose, for instance, not to have the language, we would still have some responsibility to them to let them finish out their sequence for graduation.
I realize that, but if we don't make some plan on, this could go on indefinitely. In other words, once you start it, then you're always going to have, so in other words, if we, for instance, had one child who took German and decided to take a sequence all the way through high school, one student in German, we would have to provide a teacher for it.
No. That's my argument to the point of being kind of silly. There has to be a cutoff at some point, and we've chosen with some of these special areas to let that cutoff be between 10 and 12. So if we had a particular student, we wouldn't offer the language.
We wouldn't offer it in a format that would take up full-time equivalents. There are distance learning programs. There are lots of other ways to meet that child's needs without a consistent class structure.
It might have to be looked at.
But rather than have that breakoff point between 10 and 12, you simply said, starting next year, there'd be no more German in 8. That's an example.
If we as a district chose not to offer one of the foreign languages, then we would have to deal with it in kind of a phase-out experience. But again, I would remind you that for the kids in grade 8 and in grade 9, even if a particular language disappeared, the FTEs would still be there because we have the students to work through the program.
Yeah, but if you look at numbers, it wouldn't take the increase of 2/10 in both of those two languages, but that's...
It probably wouldn't. The other thing that you might have noticed with the foreign language is you reviewed the FTEs in the buildings, is that there's a remarkable amount of sharing of staff in foreign language between the junior and senior high school. I believe this year there are 3 people from the high school going to the junior high school to fill out the teaching time needed to offer the program.
Yeah. On both the Latin and the German, I think you'll notice the numbers, and as the classes get bigger, both the teachers we have in those 2 areas have been working very hard to build their enrollment, and I think that you're seeing a reflection of that coming into the high school right now. We have 2 very dynamic people that are doing a super job, and I think you're going to see a different balance of some of the kids going in because of the personalities involved. So they are building their program. Both of them are relatively new to the district, and they've worked very hard in this last year or so to start building their program back up to where they're competing for numbers with the other classes. And I think as the classes get bigger, I think you'll see more of a balance of some of these numbers. I think you'll see more kids opting for the Latin and German as time goes on, and out of the Spanish. And the other thing is that we have kids who are taking 2 languages, and that is certainly an excellent second language for a lot of the kids, the Latin or the German.
With each grade level, I gave you a projected student-teacher ratio. So that should help you as you think about how you want to react to the information that's there. At the junior high school and the senior high school, that's a little harder to do. So what we've done is we've patterned ourselves after what the state does. We've chosen English, and we've used enrollment in English to determine what would be an average class size at both the junior high school and at the high school. And not average class size, an average student-teacher ratio.
Mike, is librarian for the junior high, is that just strictly based on students, such as student population? The addition of 1?
The addition of 1 is based on 2 things. It's based on increasing enrollment. It's also based on the current regs, which require the junior high school librarian to spend a lot of time in instruction with the students. They have the same direct instruction with library skills with the students.
There's a mandated library skills for. Did you?
We're going from 708 to 731 now, right? That's the increase, 23 for another teacher. And just the last one, guidance, that's based on student population as well?
Based on increasing enrollment.
That's a good report. It's easy to understand.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I like this.
I'd like to take credit for that, but I think with Mr. Green's direction about making things keep it simple.
So I can understand it.
Anything else on the staffing? Any more questions? General support?
I can stand up. The general support staff report and preliminary 93-94 budget request continues our new approach to the budget process where we break down each part of the budget piece by piece and present it to the board throughout the fiscal year. The general support areas in the budget are all of the costs associated with the financial end of the district, all of the costs associated with the Office of the Superintendent, costs associated with our personnel areas such as the civil service cost and also our employee assistance program costs. In addition, all of the district insurance costs, also all legal fees, data processing, printing, and also what's called a contingent account, which is a set amount of money that the state has established city school districts can keep in reserve for any catastrophic or unforeseen costs that may arise during the next fiscal year, which in essence is 18 months away. The general support budget, or the report, is broken down into three areas. Number one, the 91-92 expenditures, the 92-93, the current fiscal year appropriations, and the preliminary requests. And again, these aren't recommendations, requests for the 93-94 year. The one thing I will share with the board, which they're aware of, is that the staff costs are not associated in here. Staffing is handled through the three staff reports: support staff, instructional staff, which we had tonight, and the administrative staff report, which will be presented to the board in February, on the 23rd of February. The bottom line in terms of central or general support requests, it's less for 93-94, it's less than 0.5% increase. Okay, so basically, it's to hold the line. And 2/3 of the general support budget is operation and maintenance of the plant, okay, which I haven't mentioned yet. That's everything to do with our buildings, keeping them up, heat, light, utilities, etc., plus all of our maintenance. That's 2/3 of our costs. And basically, we feel, and we're going to monitor this, but about 0.5%, less than 0.5% increase next year is hopefully we can hold that. I'll open the floor for any questions.
We don't have the 93 actual money spent, do we?
No. One thing I can say to you, we're approximately halfway through the year. We have mass encumbered some areas, and we will continue to do that. And as we go along in our budget development, when we begin with our drafts, I can give the board actual expenditures to date, which you get monthly at the end of the month. You get every month. Plus, I can give you projections. One of the issues, obviously, is like taped utilities. We have an idea of what the cost may be, but again, it depends on the severity of the winter, etc. So I can provide that, in quite detail, actually, when we get to the end of the year.
Can I ask you, Wayne, on the utilities, while you're talking about it, is what you asked for, is that factored in with the increase latest?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, the natural gas is very, very nominal. And basically, we're mostly natural gas throughout the district, which is part of a bid that we do through the Onondaga, Cayuga County BOCES, Oswego County and Onondaga and Cayuga. All the schools in these counties go together to form one bid, so we get a tremendous price.
We buy the gas at the head.
Great.
And just pay transportation.
I was wondering why it was not that high. It surprised me.
I asked a bunch of them, Wayne, just so I can share some more. By taking in central administration, like for the other services, I mean, it's a drop in 57. Why is it dropping in 57? Well, what's that? It's a big drop. I'm not against it as a taxpayer, obviously, but I wonder
I was going to explain that, and I wanted to test you people. Very good. So, I was hoping somebody asked. I'm sorry. No, I intended to include that. What that represents, That it represents the costs that were associated with our interim superintendent, all the fees associated with searches, et cetera. And that's why there's an increase there. But I will say this to you, the monies were transferred from another account, which was the contingent account. So obviously it's a higher appropriation there this year, okay? Good question.
Okay, and then on auditing and fiscal agent, that one went for other services, that went down 10, is that like getting a different person to do the auditing?
No, that's called, to be absolutely candid with you, us getting more efficient in the business office by decreasing our,
Somebody can't do the audit service, because it's less time involved for them to do it?
right, we do as much as we can, but it's also auditing, fiscal agent fees for bonding, et cetera, plus our internal auditor fees associated with that, and all the materials, et cetera. Another point of interest that I mentioned to the board, we are looking into preparing a bid for 3 years to see what we can get in terms of different firms, different auditing firms, by going to bid, which we'll be coming with very soon, for a 3-year bid on a new auditing firm, just to see how the price is.
There are two factors here, of course. One, now that we have a full-time accountant on staff, more of the preliminary work of audit is being done in-house, which would lower that cost. But on the possible change of auditing, outside auditing firms, we are aware that Ernst & Young, who has done the auditing here for years on a national level, has been fined $4.5 million by the federal government in concern with the S&L crisis, and that has no bearing on the local office, but I think it does reflect, could have a bearing and should be looked into when we change auditing.
I got one more for you, on insurance. 1910 there. Like the 92, 93, 93, 94, I went up to 37. That's not a crippling amount against 400. But if you take from 91 to 93, went up 100,000. 30. Do we competitively bid that, or how do you go about?
Yeah, we get our agent bids around to get the best price, but a lot of it has to do with claims. Yes, annually. Yes, and it has to do with claims. Some years, a district can incur substantial claims. Other years, things, it's like, are pretty good. And basically, it's, your premiums and your claims. If you have a lot of claims, you're going to pay more. Yes.
The market also gets soft and hard at various times in terms of insurance. I mean, 10 years ago, they were boosting insurance rates 25-30% a year. And then all of a sudden, the market, after they'd made enough, the market got softer. It can be very competitive if you're on the bid stats.
Another part of this, we always do look to reduce our costs. And last year, we shifted to self-funding for our workers' compensation, and that saved us well over $100,000.
Would any of this be self-funded one? Do any districts self-fund any of this, or is this too dangerous?
No, not necessarily, because you have to have a large group to go into the self-funding or a consortium, and there isn't, not for the insurance, you're talking catastrophic, vehicle, all types of issues, and it's, you don't see many school districts want to get into those markets.
Any other questions for Wayne?
I just want to ask real quick, Wayne, on 16-2002, equipment, operations, the plant maintenance, 32,000. Can you just refresh my memory? I'm sure you probably told me.
Yes. There will be more follow-up on that. However, in our budget workbooks, from that presentation that we gave, and I know it was a while back, and my mind has gone too, that's why I'm going through the workbook,
That's okay.
budget book. The equipment that we're looking at purchasing, and again, if you'll notice, there hasn't been any equipment in a while. It's been a 3-point hitch leaf blower. This is used to help clean up the grounds for $2,000. A 1-ton van, which would replace the one we currently use now, which is needs replacing for $12,000. And also An issue that I will be getting back to the board in more detail on is the four-wheel drive pickup truck with a plow, which we do not have any four-wheel drive pickups in the district. And of course, we discussed this about the pros and cons in terms of giving us the capability to clean some areas.
Okay. Thank you, I remember that as soon as you step it.
What's that? Yes, thank you very much, Mike and Wayne, for excellent reports. It helps us understand the budget a lot.
Good. Great step. I like the pink.
Well, this year's blue, next year's pink, the year after green, Margaret.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it's favorite color, let me know.
All right. Lavender's pretty.
We're beginning to schedule everything, aren't we? Next item, Transportation Committee Progress Report. Steve, Jonas?
I'm going to start in a rather unusual way and suggest that everybody in the room, with the exception of maybe Wayne, has been sitting for about an hour and 15 minutes, because this is going to take me about 45 minutes or so. I suggest you all stand up for 30 seconds, and then members of the task force remain standing when other folks sit down. So if you'd like to sit down and stand up and stretch, please feel free.
I know, because they knew I was coming. The thing that makes me mad is because they knew I was coming.
Okay, I guess I'd like the members of the task force to remain standing at this point, and the other folks can, if they would, be kind enough to have a seat. I'm sure it's accidental that some folks expecting my report chose to leave right away. I'd like to introduce the members of the task. I'd like to introduce the members of the task force first. Diane Lazinski, Michelle Spielberg, Sue Hinman, Bill Lynch, Pat Holmes, Mike Maritzi, and Donna Osborne. Larry Callahan is coaching tonight, so he couldn't make it. Jim Schreck is otherwise occupied, as is Amanda Clark, our second student representative. I want to review the charge with you, because we had to review it several times. We charged the task force with looking at and making recommendations regarding transportation policies concerning pickup points, efficiency and cost effectiveness of current district-owned transportation versus contracting for the same services, make recommendations on the bus driver's request to park their vehicles at different locations between runs, and make recommendations concerning the new education law addressing child safety zones. We decided to make one other decision, and that was our decision-making process. And our decision-making process for the task force was that we would try to reach consensus, and by that I mean everyone could not only live with but also support the decisions of the task force. That was our prime method of decision-making. If that failed and the group agreed by consensus, we would go to a 60% majority vote to support anything. By a 60% majority vote, the task force did ask me to commend Mr. Blue and Mr. Presky for serving as valuable resources to us. With that, which was meant in humor, you have the preliminary recommendations in your backup. I just want to go through them very briefly. You've certainly had a chance to read them. We are recommending within certain limits, and these are preliminary recommendations, but within certain limits that drivers of district-owned, district-operated vehicles be allowed to take the vehicles and park them at home if there is an hour or longer between runs. And we suggest some limitations on that policy. That's in the backup. That recommendation, preliminary recommendation, was made by consensus. We also recommended a bunch of child safety zones. That's our recommendation too. This was made by consensus. Child safety zone is an area or a boundary over which children should not be expected to walk. Therefore, they can receive busing, buses, and I believe that busing becomes aidable. Is that correct? First child safety zone is outside the city of Fulton. All students who reside outside the city limits, we believe, should be bused, so therefore the city limits provide one child safety zone boundary over which students should not walk. Another boundary for G. Ray Bodley students is the river. So we don't expect students to walk across the river even if they use the bridges. Because the junior high school is outside the city limits, we believe that that is bounded by a child safety zone, and there should be busing available to all junior high students. Because of peculiarity, Oneida Village Drive is the only street that is north of Oneida Street that is in the Fairgrave attendance zone. Therefore, we want Oneida Village Drive to be a child safety area and transport all the children from that area to Fairgrave. All students east of the center line of State Route 48 for all elementary students who attend Granby. We don't want kids crossing 48 to get to Granby. They can walk along 48 if they live on the other side, on the Granby side of 48, to get to Granby. And again, that's for kids living inside the city. All areas north of the center line of Curtis Street and west of the center line of State Route 48 for all elementary students who attend Lanigan School. Again, we don't want kids crossing Curtis Street or 48 north of Curtis Street to have to cross 48 to get to Lanigan. All areas west of the center line of State Route 481 for all students attending Fairgrave. We don't want kids crossing 481 to be able to walk to Fairgrave. All of the areas south of the center line of Hannibal Street for all students in elementary grades K3 who attend Granby. We don't want our youngest kids to have to cross Hannibal Street to get into Granby. All of the areas west of the center line of State Route 48 for all students in elementary grades K3 who attend Lanigan. We don't want our youngest kids to cross 48, even though there is a crossing guard and flashing lights on 48 there. We feel that the 4-6 kids can handle that, but we'd like to continue to provide transportation for that. By the way, the K3 kids, you'll be hearing about new transportation zones on that. All of the areas south of the center line of State Route 3 Broadway for all students in elementary K3 who attend Fairgrave. We don't want the littlest ones crossing Broadway to get to Fairgrave. And the 11th part of the child safety zone is Holly Drive. We don't want the kids crossing Holly Drive to get to Fairgrave. Third recommendation, also by
Before we go further.
Yep.
No one considered Oneida Street a dangerous street.
We didn't feel that it was dangerous for the kids who live on the east side of Oneida Street to go to Fairgrave. Kids on the west side of Oneida Street already go to Granby and have transportation. There are no kids. I'm sorry, north and south.
That's not true.
Well, it's supposed to be true according to
That's the way the attendance areas are set up.
Well, those kids that I see walking on 7th Street and crossing Oneida Street, and you've got a crossing guard on the corner of 7th and 9th, someone better tell them. They've been going to the wrong school.
We may have tried that. One of the things that we've said is that people may voluntarily ask to be in another school other than their attendance zone, and then they become responsible for their own transportation. And you may be seeing some of those kids. Okay? But it's my belief and the research that I was given that the attendance zone is Oneida Street.
Well, and for the first time, and this is the first year I've seen, there's a guard on the corner of 7th and Oneida, and you've never had one there before.
Because there was one who was freed up from the Erie Street and 6th Street area.
Wherever she came from, I don't know, but I mean, you never had one there.
I can't answer you further than that.
That's where she came from.
Our third recommendation, again, was done by consensus. We are recommending that children who are in kindergarten through 3rd grade and who live inside the city limits and live more than 0.6 of a mile, that should be an established child safety zone. In other words, we're establishing, if you wish, a K3 walking zone of up to 0.6 of a mile. Beyond 0.6 of a mile, we believe that should be considered a safety zone and the children should be afforded bus transportation. Mr. Presky, perhaps if you could give board members the maps
They don't have maps?
Pardon?
They don't have maps?
I don't believe they have maps. That will put in terms of streets, and K3 is on one side, 4-6 is on the other. That will give you an idea. The hatched areas are the areas from which we expect students to walk. We want to continue the 1 mile walk zone for children 4-12, as long as those children do not live in an established transportation child safety zone. And we're also suggesting that all students may be required to walk up to 1/4 of a mile to a pickup point in grades K6 and up to 1 mile for a pickup point for grades 7-12. That doesn't mean the students will have to walk a mile. That gives us some flexibility so that the buses don't have to stop at every street corner or at every block. We are also recommending that pickup points be established administratively.
Now, let me get this straight now. We're saying that anybody who lives on 7th Street, south of Broadway, will be bused to Fairgrave?
K3. You're looking at the K3 side. Now, flip it over. You got the 4-6 side. And there you see some kids who live south of Broadway who can walk to Fairgrave.
And we're stopping it at...
That's a mile. Okay?
It's the present busing pattern for K6. The K6, or the 4-6 side is the present busing pattern. Or the walk zone, if you will. Anybody that's not in that hashed area 4-6, or if it is in grades 4-6 but not in those hashed areas, is being transported by currently. So there's no change on that
Current
side.
policy is a mile, and we're not recommending any change in that. On the other side, the K3 part, that is a change. Right now, it's 1/10 of a mile, basically a block. Transportation is available for K3. We're suggesting that ought to be 6/10 of a mile. And when you throw in the child safety zones, Hannibal Street, Route 48, Route 481, Holly Drive, Broadway, you cut down on that to a certain extent in some of the schools. So the kids K3 that are being expected to walk are in the cross-hatched area on the K3 side.
Can I ask you a question at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay, how did you come up with Oneida Street, 48, whatever other streets we have here, say as opposed to 4th Street?
Our perception of how busy they were.
So what would be our future guidelines for this? Did we develop any for that? I mean, given that traffic flow can change in the future?
We didn't recommend guidelines.
No guidelines, okay.
Some districts are using state highways as guidelines.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps or not, but the regs don't identify guidelines. It's up to the Board of Education.
That's correct.
Right.
And the Board of Education doesn't have to have guidelines. In fact, they kind of obliquely suggest that you not have guidelines, that you continue to be free to establish child safety zones wherever you may see fit.
Okay, so here's my question, and I'll throw out this. So we pick up an increased amount of traffic next year on 4th Street, just as an example. And somebody calls in and has a grave concern about their child crossing 4th Street. Do we reconvene another committee, or how do we make it?
I don't think you need a committee.
How do you make that decision?
I don't think you need a committee to establish a child safety zone.
Okay, but is there a recommendation? How would we handle that? Or, I mean, we don't have anything in place right now.
We didn't make a recommendation to that.
Other than that administratively, we would deal with pickup points.
We did make, that's another recommendation, but we did recommend that the pickup points be decided administratively, as is current policy.
For some of the board, just a little history, it used to be quite consistently argued that only distance could be a criteria for determining whether any child got transportation. And if you transported one child at that given distance, you had an obligation to transport all children at that given distance. The ability to establish a so-called child safety zone pretty much does away with the requirement that you limit your decisions to distance, because you can now incorporate your definition of a safety aspect to who you're going to pick up. The problem is there's no such thing as a safe road, and every road is unsafe by someone's definition. So you have to establish some sort of line in the dirt, as it were, that of course will be challenged as soon as you put it down. But to have some sense of understanding as to how the committee operated, that can be your authority. If in fact this is wrong or turns out to be wrong, you may not have to generate a committee to make a decision, but you may want to at some future point. But certainly to commit to this for a period of time would not be unreasonable, to test how you want it, because it's what is the likelihood of...
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at for future, not finding ourselves going, now what do? We didn't think of that coming out of this committee, because we...
Off the cuff, and I haven't gotten a chance, of course, backing for this. This is a voice of one. I would suggest that you would refer it to such requests to the Director of Transportation.
Well, and I'm only going to share with you, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I think there was enough complaints generated at the start of this school year, and we found ourselves with thinking that we had established some things to help the transportation person to make those decisions, and found out that we really didn't. It was going to your committee in some part. So what I'm asking for is maybe we need to come back to this at some point and just decide how we want to handle it, so it's not that what do we do now situation, that person knows what they have leeway to do, based on, that makes sense based on what's already been done, I guess is what I'm looking at. Something sensical. Not that it's always going to be sensical to everybody you talk to, but...
That is not sensible. I mean, we're not going to be able to guarantee that it's going to be sensible to everybody.
That's right. But maybe if you could share, or if we had some way of sharing what...
They seemed like the busiest streets.
Okay, then if we can put that down...
That's basically right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not disputing that, but I mean...
It seemed most hazardous to have the kids crossing those streets.
Okay.
So we thought they were child hazard zones.
Most of those are state highways.
State highway.
Curtis Street.
Yeah.
That's 170.
Maybe a question. Which 4th Street? Here 4th Street?
I'm sorry. I'm just
If you
as an
mean
example.
here 4th Street, we've got a crossing guard right there.
Not there for always the public school children. Not always.
Well, that's possible, but it's
Different
there.
times.
They're there for the Fulton Catholic schools.
Point of
Yeah.
clarification.
And that's where some things can be addressed if you have a question.
If the crossing guards are pulled all of a sudden,
Right, then we have...
and we don't have any control over that, we may want to rethink any of the child safety zones.
Mm-hmm.
We may not. Then if you look at transportation studies and child safety, the most dangerous time a kid has going to and from school is getting on and off the bus. The kids that walk, even crossing dangerous streets, have less opportunity to get hit and hurt. It's nationwide studies.
Point of clarification, just so that there's not misunderstanding. We do not have ownership. Carl
No.
said we have crossing guards. Crossing guards are the employees of the city.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Recommendation 4, also a consensus recommendation. We recommend no change in the policy 8411 or regulation 8411R. The pickup points should be established by the superintendent in cooperation with the Director of Transportation and/or the contractor. Recommendation 5, this is our 60% majority recommendation. This was not consensus, so we've given you reasons both for and against. We are recommending that there be no change in the current mix of contract-operated and district-operated transportation. I don't want to read rationale back and forth unless you feel a need to. I figure most of you folks can read it for yourselves. Recommendation 6, which is not on here, is we would recommend you allow us to hear the public regarding these, and we would, by your leave, set up a public hearing and give the public an opportunity to express their feelings and their reasoning for their feelings to us, and then we would, the task force would re-meet and consider what we heard and send final recommendations for your March 9th meeting, along with a synopsis of what we heard at the hearing. That's it.
I'd like to.
I'm going to suggest then that we have a public hearing February 25th. And I'd like it to be here, and I need to clear the calendar here. And that's news to the task force. Put on your calendar for it, folks. And suggest that we have it here in the auditorium.
In all your discussions and everything else, is this a heck of a lot different than what we've been doing?
Parts of it are and parts of it aren't. We've been providing transportation for kids who live a tenth of a mile and more from school and asking no one to walk more than a tenth of a mile, grades K-3 in the city. We're now suggesting 6/10 of a mile and 1/4 of a mile walking to a pickup point. That's a fairly big difference.
In the city, we're saying they walk. Right?
That's correct. Whereas previously, virtually every kindergarten through third grader has been provided access to bus transportation.
From what I've seen, it's a door-to-door, they're letting a child off.
Yeah, and I was just curious, and I don't know how you'd know that, whether there would be a big reduction in stopping the buses and picking kids up. I mean...
We need to work that out. Wayne?
One thing that we are currently doing, we do have a bus routing software package which we are now working on so that we will be able to do all types of queries. In other words, with the addresses of the students and the school attendance zones, we can know how many students will be on a particular run, an address, a list, etc. So we can get back to you with a report in terms of less number of runs or whatever we need.
Yeah, good.
I have another question. K through 6, walking to pickup point, 1/4 of a mile.
That's correct.
But K through 3, walking to school, 6/10 of a mile. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would we expect K through 3 to walk 6/10 of a mile, and K through 6, on the other hand, to a pickup point, only 1/4 of a mile?
One of the parts of the reasoning behind that is kids who are waiting for a bus, or kids who are walking to school, kids who are waiting for a bus can stay inside and see the bus coming, go out and hop on it. Kids walking to a school have a certain idea of how long it's going to take them to get to school. Kids walking to a pickup point may have less idea of how long they're going to be exposed to the cold. One of the things we figured that was a decent trade-off. We can use fewer pickup points, sending the buses back and forth, have some flexibility and freedom in the pickup points. I'm not sure that we want to get huge groups of kids. 6/10 of a mile would get a huge group of kids all together. Fortunately, my neighborhood is a walking point, so I wouldn't have to worry about them congregating in my front yard. But I wouldn't be real happy about 60 kids congregating in my front yard waiting for the bus.
Shirley Jack.
Don't call me Shirley.
Point of question for me, is there a sidewalk cleaning ordinance in the city? Are people required to clean those sidewalks so kids have places to walk?
Yeah.
I don't know. Not having a sidewalk,
It used to be that people don't do it anymore. No, we did it years ago when we were kids, but they don't really do it anymore.
we don't know if there's an ordinance, and it sounds like it's about 2 to 1 against shoveling.
No.
in terms of actually happening. So I don't know whether there's an ordinance or not.
It's fun to walk on a sidewalk.
You have
It's so common to walk in the street in the wintertime, or even in the summertime when the sidewalks are clear, everybody still walks in the street.
Well, you can fit more across.
Right.
Steve, is your committee going to publicize this, now your recommendations?
I'm hoping that members of the press who have been asking for early release of information will now accept our report and know the date and put in, they'll get copies of the maps from Mr. Kresge and put everything in the paper, I hope.
Recommendations. Had you considered maybe flyers sending home with the kids so that the parents are exposed to the possibility of the safety zones and the pickup points?
I had not considered that, but I can ask the principals in their mailings, and we're really basically talking about changes in 3 of the elementary schools, affecting those 3 schools, having a special invite to.
As a parent, I would like to know if there's going to be a change in where my child was picked up, and I think that's fair.
I have one more question. Dealing with district buses.
Yes.
There wasn't, I'm not real clear on the significance of the cost for, there's some casual mention, so could you elaborate a little bit on why it would be to our advantage and to maintain it? And I'm not really sure what you meant here. I mean, this 30,000 is...
We figured that the difference in savings of local tax effort after state aid was figured out and on the last and best figures we could get from Wayne, that there would be about a $30,000 difference in local tax effort.
Okay, what would be the overall? Oh, sorry.
I'm going to guess about 110. I don't do backwards percentages very well. Whatever that figure is, that minus 78% of it leaves you with 30,000. We felt that running our own fleet allowed us some better control, more immediate response time to unusual circumstances, and the ability to do some different kinds of things. For instance, getting some coaches who could take one of our vehicles with a small team to an event which might not be possible always with a contractor. And we figured that was worth, that kind of flexibility and quick response time was probably worth $30,000.
More flexibility. Can you talk to me about that? Why was it more? I mean, you met with people, so I mean...
I'll say that I've had the experience of being able to get bus routes changed because a child has entered the district or a child's needs have changed very, very quickly using our own transportation. Just excellent communication. There's someone in that office. It gets done immediately. Other folks, and I haven't experienced it myself, other folks have had a longer wait time getting changes made from contractors.
Okay, so that was through contacting other districts for how they do it? And
No, other folks on the task force had a longer wait time with some of our contractors in terms of some changes. Because right now, you need to realize the transportation that we're providing right now is low incidence transportation, and needs to have an unusually high degree of flexibility, partly because of the transient nature of some of the population, and partly because of the changing needs of some of the population.
Bottom dollar line on recommendations 2 and 3 should be a decrease in dollar expenditure from our present setup.
Well, I'm not going to buy that, but I'm going to say that the bottom line of 2 and 3 will at least make any increases less, if not decrease. I don't know what the total transportation bill is going to be, but we should be running fewer buses.
or fewer routes, or contracting for fewer buses or fewer routes.
Steve? And on that recommendation number 5, I guess it's the minority report.
Yes.
I mean, it's 30,000, and then there's an additional savings if you went with minority report, because you don't have to buy 4 additional vehicles. I mean, so it's more than 30,000 the first year.
More than 30,000 the first year, because we did not buy 2 vehicles last year, because this task force was going to meet and make a recommendation, and we weren't sure which way it was going to go. To get us back up online, we're talking about buying 4 vehicles. There was a standard of buying 2 new vehicles every year as replacement vehicles. We're going to need 4 this time.
If you keep getting reserves, you need 4 buses, 4 vehicles. Because 2 you didn't buy.
Next year, yeah, right. I know we'll be back on track for 2 a year.
What would 4 cost? I know it's a one-time check,
Carl?
obviously.
It's been 2 years since we bought buses. Actually, we bought one last year, but that was on an emergency basis because we had one student who had to have an air-conditioned bus, so we bought a bus last year, 1. We should have bought 2 last year. We should have bought 2 this year. So right now we're standing 3 buses down. My recommendation for Wayne this year was that if we kept it, we'd go for 4 buses for next year, approximately $32,000 per bus. For us, that's for a 22-passenger bus, and I think we can get by with the wheelchair buses that we have this year. So my recommendation would be for a 22-passenger bus because it will allow us more flexibility in the numbers of students that we can transport.
Is that 32,000 additional aidable?
Yes.
So it's, again, you're talking about 22% of that
So you got
32
96,
grand.
you got 22, you got 25 and 30, you got 55,000. I mean, real farmers and assholes quick and dirty. What that expression is. Nobody can be wrong.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
So if we go to 22-passenger buses, will that mean in the future we would need fewer buses? I mean, a smaller fleet, I guess is what I'm asking, as opposed to now, or would that not work, or have we not looked at that yet, or?
That's my intent. If I'm still there, that's my intent in making the recommendation, because right now there are some of our buses which are right at 16 passengers, and we can't put an additional student on the bus without finding somebody else to get off the bus. And there's, I would say right now, 4 routes that are right at capacity, and if somebody comes into the district and needs transportation, I'd be hard-pressed to take and do it.
Yeah, another factor that we have to always keep in mind is that these students are bused due to their certain needs, and they go to certain locations, and they're from all over the district on that vehicle. We do have time restraints that we do not like to exceed with these students. So you cannot get too large a vehicle, depending on where the students live, so you can't always say a 22-passenger vehicle is going to meet all your needs, because you may only be able to put 10 students on because they have to go to a certain school out of the district, and they live all over the district. And we don't want them on there for an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning.
Okay, I
So
understand
there's a
that.
lot of factors that...
Yeah, so then what's the cost difference between a 22-passenger and a smaller bus?
Well, certain runs, certain programs, you can, a 22-passenger vehicle will definitely, like we have some 16-passenger,
Right.
give us flexibility in terms of getting more students on there if they do move in. It's not the end-all answer, cure-all to consolidate a lot of runs, is what I'm trying to point out.
Okay.
Carl, going from 16 to 22 passenger, does that change the requirements of the license and the training of the drivers?
Not as long as we stay away from air brakes. And a 22-passenger bus will not have air brakes. A 30-passenger bus would. And a 30-passenger bus would require a change in license, but some of our drivers are already licensed for a 66-passenger bus.
Okay, but that's not required in
No.
terms of our present fleet. Any other questions for the,
No, thank you.
Just one more comment, if I may. You read a lot of good publicity about senior citizens, and I want to take special note of the senior citizen on our committee. She provided us great insight and spoke her mind and thought through a lot of the questions. This is kind of a different senior citizen. Michelle Spielberg attended almost every meeting, and she's a senior at G. Ray Bodley.
thank you. Steve, my commendations to you, your leadership and your committee. I think it's an outstanding job. Thank you. Next item is some conversation on what we're going to do about our policy manual. At the request at the last board meeting, just some quick discussion. I offered up in the prep materials just a quick model that we don't have to feel that this is something that has to be done immediately. This policy manual has already been adopted. The final draft we can develop over a period of time, and I constructed a schedule where we would perhaps take on sections at a time, target a month, and those people on the board and among administrative staff who are driven to comment and to make recommendations, we could bring all those together and share them, let's say, the first meeting in April, and then have a final draft rewritten by the second meeting in April, just as an example. I don't know how much change we might need. Certainly, this schedule will work for some of the sections. It might not work for some of the other sections, but I offer it just as a means by which we could go around our final draft.
I personally like it. A tremendous amount of effort has gone into developing the policy book to this point, and we need to be sure that everyone's comfortable with the policies that are in there, board as well as administration. I think John can give us a lot of insight, and I think we need to have him review the procedures along with us.
I certainly think with the change of administration, we need to make a further review of the total. I also think that while I already spotted a very few minor technical errors, like Erie Street still has schools still being in there, which is very minor. Certainly, I'd like to see us have enough time to all of us go through it. It's a tremendous tome, and just being individuals, all of us are not interested in all of it. So there's certain parts that would interest me that might not interest you, and vice versa. But that would take actually scanning of the going through it. And basically, we all have a limitation on our time.
For instance, I think section 8,000 is on student instruction. I would like administrators to spend some time on that to give us their input. If we've got some policies that are creating problems rather than solving them, then I'd like to have someone share that.
I just want to bring up the reason I asked for this to be, and I did, on the agenda, was because we have a policy, 2410, and then 2410R, which is a regulation that follows that policy, that I thought we needed to look at that and clarify for everybody's purposes at the board table. We adopted this policy and this regulation, and the policy leaves it up to the superintendent to initiate a program of board revision, and gives 4 key points to look at. And the regulation speaks to at least one of those key points as far as what a policy committee would look like if we're going to use a policy committee. My question was, because we're not yet through revising what we had, and I'm not sure that when we adopted this, we really thought that out real well, where we were when we adopted all of these. Are we going to concern ourselves with worrying about implementing this policy right away, or going with John's suggestion so that there's no conflict later on, that we're not following this versus following John's suggestion? That was my only
I think a
concern.
couple things need to happen. I think we need as a board to review each section, maybe by the month, as John suggests. And I remember that committee, I have the regulation here. And that was to begin in the 93-94 school year, which would mean July on. And that committee was to have a teaching faculty staff rep, an administrative rep, a parent rep, along with 2 board members and the superintendent. And I think by that point in time, we will be through the first 3 sections so that they can begin their review, which would include the update from state school boards with all the new tags from recent regs and laws. And they can begin reviewing those sections again for us, because they'll go through that 0 through 3 for that 1-year period, and that's a 3-year cycle, so they'll actually not get to, or that group would not actually get to the last 3 sections until 96, I think. You know what I mean? And so I think a couple of things can happen, and actually the timing will be good, because we'll be done with our section before that group needs to.
I just want to say about the flexibility and
Sure.
up front, because it is a big job and everybody's going to be involved, and just some understanding before we go ahead and start this, in case we have to delay 93, 94 in July and move it along and just
That would
have
be
that
my
understanding. Okay.
That the board would need to confirm at least that section that they're gonna start working on before they could start their work.
And it would seem as the time frame would work out such that that would allow
Yeah.
that to happen. So, it'll work.
That's all I needed, just to clarify expectations of the board, because we did have the old policy committee.
Now tell me again what we're going to do.
Well, I think the one question is, how do we want to have this orchestrated? Who's going to orchestrate this for us? I mean, I guess that's one of the questions. Who wants to volunteer to kind of say, okay, this is the time frame, and if we can get a schedule of events, then we can deal with that. So everybody stays on track with where everybody's at.
I was kind of thinking that each member of the board could have the flexibility of the degree of involvement that they needed to suit themselves on each one of these sections. And that on those dates, we would just simply take each person's input, which we would have a format for, and make copies and so on and so forth, and try to, hopefully, with luck, we'll have compatibility of input on most of the suggestions, and then just crank out what people have suggested for our so-called final draft look at the second meeting. And that would be
So
something.
you would want it in writing, or you do it verbally, or you want it in writing?
I'm thinking that writing is where we want to operate, because then you can do it before you get here, and then the rewrites, we'll review how we want to do that administratively, if that's where you want it done. I assume that you did.
Well, I'm just going to ask you, I'm going to share with you that the old policy committee did a lot of that, so that administratively they didn't have that responsibility. So I don't know if that appeals to you, and I'll throw that out there. I don't know how you are set for.
We don't have time to do the job now, but the point is, I see this as a major instruction time for the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay? And our office.
As far as writing, just take the professional group from the State Association that did it, the suggestion that we write in the margins, or make the draft we've got. I don't think we need to sit down and
rewrite
as individuals, rewrite but certainly what we have now is a draft that we as individuals can make any notations, corrections we want on our current copy, and present that to the board.
So, let me give you an example. We're going to do if we choose to follow this. The first meeting in April, the zeros are due.
So that's how you got to hand it to you, right?
Yes.
Only the pages that you
With a change.
would change.
Only the pages that you want to present a suggestion on with your name on it. Then, April, I'll see, we'll try to construct a new draft and give you back your originals to go back into your book until we get new books. Because until we have new stuff adopted, this is all you've got. We've lived long enough without that.
It's suggesting that we do it in red pen so that it shows up easily to the person that's reviewing them.
Can we ask you to, at that same time, in those same sections, review the regulations and come back to us with potential changes as you see them from your position? Because we may not know specifically any law, legal, or organizational changes that you were thinking about or should
See,
be incorporated with some of that stuff.
The policy manual is the directive of the board.
Right.
The regulations are administration's approach toward administering that policy. You don't have to take action on the regulations and set them in stone. You can see them and you can approve them and know what they are en masse, but pretty much the regulations are something that we would like to have administrative flexibility in.
What I'm saying is if we can expect any updates that need to be required to those at
Yes.
the same time, then we're not spending our time looking at regulations.
Yeah. I would say the board should just work on the policy. That'll, because there's a probability that what you're going to get, if in fact we have some agreement, I think we've talked about enough, that when you're finished with this whole thing, you're really going to have two manuals. One will be a policy manual. The other will be an administrative handbook, which will include regulations, exhibits, examples, job descriptions, all of those things that are part of the other task. So we would want to separate those two books just so that you can balance when you carry them, one under each arm.
That's a good.
When you go for your walk in the morning.
Yeah.
Anything else on that, Ben?
No, thank you very
Mara,
much.
you're clear on what's expected?
Yes.
Thank you, Darren.
I have no other items. Unfinished business?
Thank you.
Okay, resolution 3 under unfinished business, please.
Second.
Discussion?
I would just like to make 2 points that I would like the committee to look into. One is that they should look up as well as down. I get the feeling that we're only talking about possibly bringing the 6th grade up into the middle school. What I'm thinking is possibly the possibility of bringing the 9th grade down instead of the 6th grade up. I know 100 years ago when I was in junior high school, the district I was in was building a new high school. We used to say the junior high and the high school ended up using the same building, morning session and a long afternoon session for a number of years. And when we ended up 100 years ago, we had a 3-3 situation, 3 high school, 3 junior high. We're already talking in the language program here, 8-9. All I'm saying is that I'd like the committee to at least look into the feasibility and teaching aspects of, and not simply be locked into the numbers situation of bringing the 6th up. The other point that I'd like the committee to look at is this whole philosophy of separate wings. Over the past 6-7 years, I've talked to a lot of students, including my own son, that did not like the 2 classes segregated as drastically as they are. He has a feeling that while you may be going a different class across the hall, the atmosphere for the student is not much different than it is spending the whole day in one classroom in the elementary. That it's not really preparing them for the movement they get at the high school level. And it's not just so I've talked to the students in all the various years that have attended, and I've had an awful lot of students that were not happy with the structure of separate wings.
And the board's intent, when we talked about doing this last year, was to have it looked at from every which way, upside down, right side out, any kind of configuration, the sky's the limit. So, and you're right in thinking that that's exactly what we were headed and what we wanted to do was look at all the possibilities and come on.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? Resolution 4.
Move it. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? Resolution 5.
Move it. Second.
Discussion?
I'm certainly in favor of a safety committee, and certainly the structure of it looks adequate. But I just call members of the board's attention, I hope everybody got and had a chance to read Jerry Hogan's letter,
Yes.
which I thought for anyone who did not know, and I did know, the history and the purpose of the task force, and I can't agree with Jerry more. I certainly think that the air quality should be upgraded to a separate, full-blown standing committee.
Then we should change the policy. That's a policy issue at this point. I mean, this resolution is aimed at one of our specific policies. So we could change the policy.
I would like to add the quality, certainly the interest that was shown tonight, and the interest that's going to be shown in the next 2 years with the renovation of the high school.
Well, I think one of the important things to remember, as Superintendent Grant had mentioned 2 weeks ago, is that if that group, as a air quality task force, wants to report directly to the board, it's not going to be a problem. I think I understood that very clearly.
There's no question that
And so,
the concern of air quality is going to really drive the mission of that safety committee at its onset.
Sure.
That subcommittee, their role can be as big as is necessary. And it may be that after we've tried this approach, the board may decide that this wasn't adequate. To presume that it won't be adequate at this time is speculation. You've got a policy intact. I can't speculate as to whether it's good or bad, but it's what we have. And the recommendation is here to go after it. And of course, we can always review that policy.
Does the policy we have intact at the present time preclude any other committees? In other words, does the policy we have intact now say we cannot have a separate committee on air quality? Standing committee?
I don't have the policy in front of me, Charlie. I don't know it well enough.
No, but it does say that anything of a safety and health nature would have to go through the safety committee, which, you know, you're going to have a safety committee that has to see it, so you're going to say the safety committee has to see it, and then the task force, and the task force still can, but in part, maybe it does make sense to have people from the task force on the safety committee to let the safety committee know for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of those people on the safety committee are going to be people charged with addressing a lot of those problems. So I would think that maybe from the standpoint, once everything falls into place, that the air quality people might be real happy to know that they have direct access to the people that are going to be charged with solving a lot of the problems and, you know, making changes. If it doesn't work, we can change it. But I don't think that we're tying up the hands of the air quality. I think they have a job to do. I think it's a real big job. And I felt very strongly at the time that we did this, that they not be discounted, and we realized that what they had to do, what we needed to do for air quality, and Mrs. Osborne had come to us prior to, so that's where all this started, and wanted a task force, and then the question arose, well, we have this policy, how do we deal with it? And I firmly believe the safety committee, as such, is going to have an awful lot to deal with, and if we're going to do things well, I think we're going to see a lot of subcommittees, but like John said, having authority designated to them is needed. You know, if they need more from us or need to get to us, then I don't see why we can't address that and get things rolling. I'm afraid of holding things up even further. I'd just like to get moving and get this in place. If we change the policy, we're looking at, what, I think at least a month? Or more, yeah. And I want to see this moving. I don't want to, you know, we can still address the policy, but could we do this and then address the policy later if we have to, so we can get going?
pass this, but I want to keep the air quality as a separate standing committee on fund farming.
In retrospect, I think there's a very practical reason why any subcommittee, any task force related to safety issues should be funneled through the safety committee. I never thought about this until the last couple of meetings. By having members of all of those task forces a part of that overall committee, we've eliminated a whole level of decisions about communication in terms of what's appropriate for this committee, what's appropriate for that committee, because all issues go to the whole committee. Everybody there is a player, and they can pick out of the issues that are presented the ones that belong in their subcommittee, rather than having Wayne or I or somebody else say, gee, who should that go to? You know, I just think having everybody that's a player around that one table, or at least a representative from each group, is critical if we're going to deal with communication.
Well, I think the other nice aspect of it is that the safety committee is a mandate, and allowing the air quality task force to be a subcommittee of that process gives them a standing position in our district. And so if that committee will rely on them on a regular basis, where that's been haphazard as we know it from the past 4-year experience. Very heavy at one point, not so heavy in the last year or so.
I mean, there's nothing in our policies that indicates it's a mandate.
I think it stems from one of those commissioners' regs. Not right. Maybe I'm not right.
Well, no, I'm just saying I'm not sure that it is. But either way, we're trying to do a good thing here.
Yeah,
It's
well,
not
I'm saying it's allowing them to function through that mandate, is giving them a standing status.
But I don't think we can't not address it. I would just like to be able to deny at least this to get started and get that air quality people in place with the plan that's been developed so we can move on it. And we can come back and deal with this. I don't think it'll affect the job the air quality task force will do.
Let's go with it.
A comment I can share with you, since the last board meeting, I have been in contact with Mrs. Osborne, and I asked her if she could contact the members of the former air quality task force to see if they would be willing to reconvene the subcommittee to the safety committee. Now, tomorrow, an agenda will be going out to the safety committee members, of which the air quality task force being reconvened as a subcommittee will be one of the agenda items. And we are meeting next week. We do have, I'm sorry.
I meant, how soon do you see the air quality task force
Well, the presumption was
be
probably
revised?
to say tomorrow, but then I think to share with the safety committee the recommendation that they do reconvene and get them going, because the overall charge of that safety committee is admin.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of subcommittees that are going to have to form, because there's no way it can all be done. Can't.
One question I'd also have to does the resolution as worded, since it lists details specific people, safety committee will consist of the following members, names, with 2 on item 11 for the air quality task force. Does that preclude any other people participating or being members of any of this panel?
There is in the policy allowance for any of our bargaining units to send a representative to be part of this. So, and we wouldn't have their names necessarily. Okay, they can do that.
What about citizens?
One comment I will share, these meetings are open meetings.
Right.
And in the past, in some of the committees we've had other people come and observe the meeting, and, you know, if there's something, you know, help they can give. I mean, nobody's afraid to take advantage of some help people have. They're open meetings for other people. As a matter of fact, I do know of one gentleman who'll be at the meeting next week who wants to show up to see what's going on because there's interest, and we said they're open to anyone. So it's not excluding anyone. And there will be a lot of subcommittees. I mean, the idea, I think there's enough work to go around. We don't want to exclude people. We just want to be able to organize it and in a way so that we know what we're doing, communication top to bottom, and get the job done.
Okay, any further discussion on Resolution 5? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions. Resolution 6,
Second.
discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions. That brings us to the board forum section of our meeting. Opportunity for any board member to share information, etc., with fellow board members.
I only want to share a big thing.
policy, can we move to extend the meeting half hour?
Second.
All those in favor of extending the meeting?
Aye.
You have a half hour, Mr. Tripp.
Okay, I just want to say how much I appreciate the homework hotline. I had an opportunity to use it, found it very helpful, and I hope that other parents check in to see what's going on, you know, if they have that. Margaret had mentioned it, but I finally saw what Margaret was talking about. It's great. It's been a great resource for us in our household with the kids.
I think if anybody would take the time to call any one of the numbers, they'll find it very interesting.
Very informative. Anything else on the board forum?
I have one item on senior citizen. The state law says that we can grant a 50% exemption of assessed value with incomes below $16,500. We could have a sliding scale of exemptions for anything below $21,300. This district is, as policy as it stands now, income limit $12,025 at a 50% exemption, and absolutely no sliding scale at all. In other words, if my income was $12,030, I have to pay full tax. If it was, I throw away $5, I could get 50% reduction in my tax. The city has a sliding scale, and using the 12,025, but they also go all the way up to 15,625 for 20% reduction. The Granby town has a spread between 12,525 and 17,325. What I would really like to see is the exemption. I don't ask that the income levels go as high as the state level, but at least have a sliding scale, such as the city and the towns do, so that people under 15,000, or could still get some exemption.
Would it be fair if we did some kind of, or could we, some impact studies, or how do you fix, how do you slide, and what's the impact on the district?
Right.
And, what does it do to the other?
I'm bringing it up now is because, for one thing, our city-county tax has to be paid on or before the 15th, and by the way, the 15th is a presidential holiday, and the Chamberlain's office will be closed. That'll be a nice little trick. I would also like to throw out for public comment, that might not be appropriate to this board, but I think the city, county could take a lesson from the school district, as I'd like to take, the school district could take a lesson from us. We allow our citizens to pay in 2 equal installments without penalty. City county says, no, you gotta pay your whole shot at once, or you have an interest penalty. If the Fulton Area Partnership and then all other interested citizens, including the school district, would really like to do the total citizenry a favor, if we could all establish a reasonable sliding scale and have all the taxes paid together, be they county, be they city, be they town, be they school district, and paid, say, quarterly with no penalty, I think we find it a lot easier for a lot of people, especially at the lower end of income levels, to pay their taxes and not lose homes.
Comments on Harold's suggestion? We need some input as far as...
Two questions at hand. One, sliding scale issue, and second, a comprehensive look at
the impact.
how we distribute those taxes, right?
We're going to need some information.
Well, yeah, I think we need to review our policies current, review the city's policies, some information from Mr. Gray, take a look at it. That way we can look at it.
Yes, and investigate the quarterly payments, the feasibility, you know, what it would do, what it would mean. As long as we're doing, let's do it all. And look at it.
Who are you gonna have look at it?
Well, we would end up looking at it in the end, like it or not. Well, no, that's what I'm asking, and then that's because, I know, he knows.
I'd certainly be willing to contact the various assessors and tax collectors myself and see what I could determine.
We have no big rush on this, I guess, is the next question I'm gonna ask, because Wayne is busy, and so, can we just
We,
do it when we do it?
from the last board, we've already decided to look into the concept of making relatively consistent the assessment status of senior citizens, if that's possible. In the arena of a payment plan for taxes, the impact on the district is significant when you review the income lost by not having those dollars available for reinvestment. Right now, pretty much, I'm going to say 65 to 70% of our income comes up front and generates interest for us. To delay the receipt of those dollars over a period of an additional 9 months, which is what would be inferred as the loss of revenue for those 9 months, that would be part of whatever study took place. Plus, I'm not aware of the taxing laws for the other municipalities and what the flexibility may be. That certainly can be reviewed. The probability of recommending something for senior citizen consistency for assessment through sliding scale, we are pretty much in control of what we can do there. The probability of a consistent group of municipalities coming together on a tax payment plan that will involve several different groups.
That's a dream, and that would involve cooperation and discussion between a lot of bodies.
And from what I read in the paper, somehow those things aren't prone to happening very quickly.
I would like to just point out, and forget to publish in the paper, but the Hannibal Central School District has a sliding scale with income limits ranging from $8,400 to $12,000. The Phoenix School District has sliding scale ranging from $12,025 to $15,025.
A lot of schools have those, and there's no reason why we can't try to be consistent within our particular area. I'd appreciate borrowing that information.
I'd like to have a copy of that, so I can take your comments and think about that.
This just happens to be the public notice for the town of Greenby, right out of the newspaper.
Anything else under the board forum? Okay, on to future meetings agenda. Anyone have any items for agenda February 23rd, March 9th, and the 23rd of March? We've got a few things we picked up. John and I can work on. Anything else that anybody has at this time?
Just quickly, the Compact Committee met last night and has set up a schedule of meetings through the end of June. They will be meeting the first Monday and the third Thursday of each month, from 6 till 9, actually 6 to 8:30 was the target, with 9 being the death knell. I was impressed with what I saw of committee operations last night. The group is a very diverse group. They seem to be gelling quite quickly with the assistance of Paul Harris and other folks from the BOCES organization. But they are beginning to nail down what the charge was, and we'll have some results. I believe well before the deadline of February 4th. Yes, sir.
John, one item that I'd like to bring to the board, the Budget Committee has recommended that on the February 23rd board meeting, they have an opportunity to give an interim report to the board, just a progress report of what's been going on and where they're heading. It'll be a brief report. Right, Bill?
Good. Anything else? If not, would someone move resolution 12, please?
Move it. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions. After a short recess, we will reconvene in executive session. Thank you all for coming.